Hey guys, tonight we're cracking open one of those history fantasies you've definitely daydreamed about at least once, right before realising how much medieval life probably sucked. You're going to wake up as a knight in medieval England. I'm talking swords, chainmail, castles, plague rats, and possibly explosive diarrhea. Yep, you're about to live the full experience. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not chasing numbers. I just want to keep telling you wild, immersive stories that help you unwind. Let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you feel is pain, not a sharp, heroic kind. Just the general, all-encompassing ache of someone who either fell down a flight of stairs or spent the night sleeping in full armour, which, as it turns out, you did. You're lying on your back in a dark room that smells like sweat, old wood, and something meaty, but not in a good way. There's straw poking into your skin through some kind of coarse fabric, and when you lift your hand to your face it makes a clink. Glove. Metal, a gauntlet. You sit up too fast and instantly regret it. Your head pounds. You're wearing layers. So many layers. Your chest is encased in something solid. Your arms don't want to move right. Your thighs feel like they've been wrapped in hot iron sausages. You manage to stagger to your feet. The room is tiny, lit only by slivers of sunlight slicing through cracked wooden shutters. There's a rough-hewn bench in the corner, a dented helmet lying next to it, and a wooden bucket that you quickly deduce is both a toilet and a general-purpose threat to your sense of smell. There's no electricity, no light switch, no buzzing phone, just the distant sound of hooves on packed dirt and birds, not cute birds, cawing like they've got a personal grudge against you. You hobble over to a splintery table and catch your reflection in a metal plate filled with still water. The face looking back at you isn't entirely yours. It's close, like a deep fake of you starring in some low-budget medieval drama. The hair's a bit longer, the jawline sharper, the eyes harder. You look weathered, dangerous, possibly constipated. There's a knock at the door. You freeze. The door creaks open anyway. A boy, maybe 15, pokes his head in. He's got straw-coloured hair, a dust-smeared face, and eyes full of terror and awe. "Milord," he says, bowing so fast he nearly topples forward. The cock's crowed twice. The cook says if you don't break fast now, she'll poison the eggs again. You stare. He stares back. "Are you unwell, milord?" You nod slowly, mostly to buy time. "Very." The boy frowns, then gives you a weirdly formal little nod. "Right, just as usual then." He disappears, leaving you with more questions than answers, and a powerful, primal need to remove at least 3 layers of clothing. You eventually manage to wrestle off your chest plate, revealing a padded undertunic soaked through with sweat. You can't find a toothbrush, or a shower, or even socks, but there's a wooden basin and a crusty rag nearby. It'll have to do. As you splash cold water on your face, your mind races. This has to be a dream. Or maybe a coma. Or, did you time travel? Did you die? You try to recall how you got here, but your memory is fogged up like the inside of a helmet after a panic attack. You remember lying in bed, checking your phone, then nothing. Except now you're here, in full night mode, with a medieval squire and the real possibility that someone might try to poison you with eggs. You step outside, the air hits you like a wall, sharp, cold, crisp in a way that modern air just isn't. You smell wood smoke, manure and bread baking somewhere nearby. The sun's barely risen over a landscape of rolling hills, thatched rooftops and muddy pathways. In the distance you spot a crumbling stone tower. Your manor, maybe? It leans slightly, like it's had a few too many ales. Villagers glance up as you pass. Some bow. Others just keep working, hammering wood, scrubbing linens, herding geese with professional level aggression. You're apparently someone here, important even, a knight by title. You try not to look too confused as you wander toward the source of the food smells, hoping breakfast involves fewer poisons than advertised. The hall is warm, barely. A fire crackles in the hearth. The cook eyes you with suspicion, sets a plate down and mutters, "Mind the green bits." You don't ask what that means. The food is fine. Kinda like eating regret with a side of sour ale. As you chew, cautiously, you start piecing things together. From the clothes, the smells, the speech, and the whole vibe, it's pretty clear you're in England. Medieval England. Not quite the fantasy medieval with elves and prophecies. This is more dirt under the nails, disease round every corner, historical authenticity type medieval. And you're not a peasant, you're a knight. Which sounds amazing until you realise that being a knight means responsibilities, land, politics, and, war. This isn't a Ren fair. This is a whole feudal system, and you're somewhere near the top. But being at the top in a pyramid made of mud and unpaid labour doesn't mean you're safe. You glance down at the eggs, still steaming, a little too green around the edges. You eat around them. Fun historical fact. Knights weren't all gallant and glamorous. Sure, you had a sword and a title, but you were also the local law, the landlord, and the muscle for whoever your lord happened to be. You spent a lot more time arguing over sheep boundaries than slaying dragons. Fringe fact. Some knights never saw actual combat. They bought their way into the title, wore fancy armour for parade days, and mostly just got drunk at tournaments. There's debate among historians about just how noble most knights really were. Some argue they were glorified thugs with a PR problem. Others insist they helped stabilise Europe by upholding codes of honour, however flexible those might have been in practice. You're about to find out firsthand. Because as you stand to leave, a skinny messenger bursts through the door, out of breath and pale-faced. "Milord," he gasps, "your presence is demanded at the manor. It's urgent. The steward says, it's the taxes." Ah, right. The taxes. Looks like your day as a medieval knight is officially underway. You follow the messenger out of the hall, still chewing the taste of sour ale and slightly ominous eggs. The path back to your manor winds uphill past stone walls and muddy fields, dotted with sheep that look like they've seen things. The sun has crept higher now, casting everything in that weirdly soft golden light that almost tricks you into thinking this medieval life might be kind of peaceful. But then your knees remind you that you're wearing like 50 pounds of gear and no one invented orthopedic insoles yet. The manor itself is underwhelming. Not the towering castle of your imagination. This is more like a fortified farmhouse with ambitions. The walls are stone but chipped and mossy. The wooden gate creaks in protest as it swings open. Inside the courtyard, a couple chickens scatter at your arrival. A black cat eyes you from the low roof, tail flicking like it's judging your whole life. A tall man in a threadbare tunic waves you over. He has a face that looks like it was carved out of bark and then aged in disappointment. This, apparently, is your steward. His name is Osric. His job? Make sure your estate doesn't fall into complete chaos while you spend your days waving a sword around or pretending to understand feudal law. "Milord," he says with a stiff nod. "You've been absent from the ledgers for 2 weeks. The tenants are restless. 2 have refused to pay their oat rents. 1 has fled. And the reeve wants permission to flog the miller again." You blink. Slowly. "Flog the... why?" "Flour theft, milord." "Of course." He shuffles through a sheaf of parchment and pushes one toward you. It's a list of names, numbers, and cryptic symbols that might as well be chicken scratch. You stare at it like it's a tax form written in Elvish. Osric clears his throat. "Perhaps your memory is still affected from your fall." You nod sagely. "Very." He doesn't press the issue. Maybe he's used to you being forgetful or drunk or cursed. You're not sure which is the more likely default for a knight in your position. You follow him through the main hall of the manor. A wide, draughty room with exposed beams, a long table, and the distinct smell of damp fur. A hunting dog raises its head from under a bench and thumps its tail once, before going back to snoring. Your seat at the head of the table is carved with faded symbols. There's a dent in the wood where apparently someone threw a goblet hard enough to leave a permanent reminder. You're not sure if it was you. Osric lays out the situation. The harvest was weak. There's been some argument over pasture rights with a neighbouring village. The village priest keeps accusing people of minor heresy. And there's a problem with the well. Again, you try to listen, but your attention keeps drifting to the window, where you can see two boys chasing a pig through the mud, laughing and shrieking like they've just invented football. Being a knight, you're realising, is basically being a glorified landlord with a sword collection. You eventually nod and tell Osric to handle it as you see fit, which he takes with a look that's 1/3 approval, 1/3 resignation, and 1/3, this guy's going to get me killed. After the meeting, you wander the grounds. Your manor includes a few small buildings, a stable, a granary, a smithy that smells like ash and burned fingers. Peasants nod or curtsy as you pass, but most don't make eye contact. Respect or fear? Hard to say. They're dressed in layers of wool and linen, mostly earth tones, like they've been styled by a particularly moody root vegetable. One older woman offers you a loaf of something she calls treacle bread, which tastes like sadness and molasses. You thank her anyway, because she looks like she could hex you with a glance. Fun historical fact: a knight's manor was part of the feudal puzzle that made medieval life function-ish. The king gave land to nobles, who gave chunks to knights like you, who oversaw peasants in exchange for labour, crops and military service. Everyone owed someone something, like a multi-tiered subscription service, but with more hay and fewer refunds. Fringe fact? Some knights were so bad at managing their manors they went bankrupt, forced to marry rich widows, become mercenaries, or, in one known case, fake their own death and flee to Wales. Not the worst idea. There's scholarly debate about how much power knights really held. Some were minor landholders with barely enough resources to outfit themselves. Others acted like mini-tyrants, ruling over their manors with an iron fist and a total lack of indoor plumbing. The records are messy, inconsistent, and probably biased. So, medieval Yelp reviews, basically. Late in the day, your squire reappears. He introduces himself as Henry, but insists you usually just call him boy, which makes you cringe a little. "I've prepared your bath, milord," he says, gesturing to a steaming wooden tub in one of the manor's side rooms. It smells faintly of rosemary and something else. Maybe goat? You dip a toe in, scalding, then tolerable, then yes. As you soak, your mind begins to buzz. You have a title, a manor, a squire, and probably the beginnings of the trench foot. But no plan, no idea how long you'll be here, or what's coming next. You don't even know how to fight yet. You're a knight in name only, a placeholder in someone else's story. And yet, there's something weirdly calming about it. The world is slower here, realer. The air smells like firewood and bread. The stars, when they appear, are shockingly bright. You settle into the water, letting your aching muscles soak and wonder what tomorrow will throw at you. The sound of hooves outside the manor gate startles you upright. "Messenger," someone calls. "From the Baron." You groan, sinking back into the water. Of course, by the time you've thrown on fresh underlayers and strapped yourself back into your partial armour, because full plate is apparently an all-day affair, the messenger is waiting in the hall. He's young, with the kind of earnest face that hasn't been punched enough by life yet. His cloak is damp from riding, and the dust on his boots tells you he's come a long way fast. He bows low. "Sir Knight, my Lord Baron Winthorpe requests your presence at court. Tomorrow." You blink. Tomorrow? That's barely enough time to find clean trousers, let alone rehearse how not to offend a baron who could technically have you beheaded for sneezing too loud. The messenger continues, oblivious to your rising panic. "A gathering of your liege knights. Matters of land and loyalty. There is word of trouble." Of course there is. You thank him, mostly to buy time while your brain races. He hands you a sealed parchment with an elaborate wax crest, then disappears with the kind of urgency that suggests don't ask questions as a survival tactic. You break the seal. The letter is all formalities and coded implications, but it ends with a line that jumps out. Attendance is expected. Absence will be remembered. Lovely. Nothing like a light threat from the guy who technically owns your kneecaps. You call for your squire, Henry, and he appears like a summoned ghost, already carrying your travel cloak and a grim expression. Shall I sharpen your blade, milord? Yes, you say, though you're not sure you know which end to point at anyone yet. And have the horse ready by dawn. That night, you don't sleep much. The straw mattress seems lumpier than usual, and your dreams are a weird mashup of modern anxiety and medieval disaster. At one point, you're naked at a feast trying to recite Latin while everyone throws cabbage at you. Classic. By morning, the mist clings low to the ground as you ride out. Henry at your side on a smaller horse that clearly resents its entire existence. The road to Baron Winthorpe's estate winds through forests of ash and oak, the leaves thinning as late autumn sets in. Your breath fogs in the chill, and the occasional raven circles overhead like a very unsubtle omen. By mid-morning you pass a roadside shrine, just a cross nailed to a tree with wilted flowers beneath it. Henry murmurs a prayer as you ride by. You consider doing the same just in case. The Baron's estate looms out of the haze around midday, a real castle, with towers and battlements, and a gatehouse that actually looks like it could survive a siege. You feel incredibly out of your league. As you enter the courtyard, you're surrounded by other knights, all in varying degrees of grimy splendour. Some polish their helmets, others lean against stone walls, exchanging rumours like medieval Reddit mods. You dismount, hand off your reins, and try not to look too confused as a herald announces your name. Badly. Sir Theorn? You don't bother correcting him. The great hall is dimly lit, its high ceiling disappearing into shadow. Long banners hang from the rafters, deep blue and gold bearing the Baron's sigil, a hawk clutching a broken chain. It's dramatic, and deeply unsettling. Baron Winthorpe sits at the far end of the hall on an elevated chair that isn't quite a throne, but definitely wants to be. He's broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and gives the distinct impression that smiling is not one of his hobbies. He raises a hand. You came? You bow, deeply, resisting the urge to say something stupid like, you summoned me. This man could have you flogged for incorrect posture. Come, join the council. You take your place at the long table surrounded by other knights. Some glance your way with vague recognition. Others just ignore you entirely. You're not the highest-ranking man here. Not even close. The Baron wastes no time. There are whispers of raids, he says, from the north. Not Scots, something worse. Disbanded mercenaries gone to banditry. Well-trained, well-armed, and bold. He slaps a scroll down on the table. 2 villages burned. 1 steward hung from his own bell rope. This will not stand. You don't breathe. Not because you're noble or horrified. Mostly because you have no idea what you're supposed to say. Another knight speaks up. What would you have of us, my lord? Your swords, your riders, loyalty. So this isn't just a friendly court visit. This is conscription, dressed up in velvet and candlelight. The Baron's eyes land on you. You've seen battle, Sir Theorn? You freeze? Technically? No. But also, your whole body is sore, your skin is calloused, and you woke up in armour. Maybe this version of you has seen battle. Yes, my lord, you say, praying it's true, and he nods once. Good. You'll ride with Sir Aldrich. He needs men who don't flinch. You have no idea who Aldrich is, but you are now one of his guys. The meeting ends with wine that tastes like vinegar and meat you try not to identify. You're given a room, stone walls, no fire, and a bed made of wood and judgment. Fun historical fact. Knights were vassals to a noble lord, like the Baron here, and were required to provide military service when called. Usually 40 days per year, but things got flexible during war. The idea was, I give you land, you give me swords. Classic medieval HR policy. Fringe fact, Some knights hated their lords and switched sides during conflicts if the pay was better, or the insults more tolerable. One guy even defected mid-siege, flinging insults over the walls the next day like it was all just banter. As for scholarly debate, there's a lot of discussion around how formalised these relationships really were. Did knights feel loyalty, or just fear? Was feudalism a clean pyramid of power, or a messy pile of favours and threats barely holding together? Historians argue about it like it's a group project gone wrong. That night you lie awake staring at the dark ceiling, trying to wrap your head around what tomorrow holds. You're not ready for a fight. You don't know if your sword's even sharp, but you're expected to ride out soon, with Sir Aldrich, whoever that is, and face something worse than Scots, and maybe, just maybe, try not to die on your first real day on the job. Dawn comes cold and grey, the kind of light that doesn't rise so much as just appear, like the world has reluctantly agreed to continue existing. You're already awake when your squire Henry bursts into the chamber with your travel gear, trailing breath in the chilled air like a little fog machine with anxiety issues. "Milord, Sir Aldrich is in the outer yard," he says, sounding like the words have been burning a hole in his throat since sunrise. "He says you're late." Great. You strap on your armour with Henry's help. He's shockingly fast at it by now, and try to ignore how much your body hates every piece. The chainmail digs. The padded gambeson clings like a sweaty hug from someone you don't like. The helmet, well, you're still deciding if wearing it is better than being concussed. Outside, the castle yard is a flurry of motion. Horses snort clouds into the air. Squires check straps and reins. Dogs bark at each other over scraps of meat. In the middle of it all stands a knight who could have been carved from iron. Tall, broad, grim as winter. That's got to be Aldrich. He turns to you, eyes sharp beneath a dented helm. "You're the one from Turnbridge?" he asks. His voice is deep enough to rattle armour. You nod. "Yes, milord." He grunts. "Hope you can ride faster than you talk." Charming. You're assigned a position mid-column, riding out with a group of 12 other knights and their squires, all grim-faced and hunched in the saddle like they expect death around every bend. No one sings, no one talks. The only soundtrack is hooves on frozen ground, and the occasional clatter of steel when someone shifts too hard. You discover quickly that riding a horse for hours isn't majestic or cool. It's a slow descent into inner thigh trauma. You try adjusting your seat. No luck. The saddle is about as ergonomic as a church pew in a thunderstorm. The road curves into woodland, bare-limbed trees skeletal and creaking, with birds flitting overhead like they're casing the joint. You spot a fox once, its red coat like a flash of fire through the frost. Everything else is grey or brown or mud. By midday you reach a small village, if you can call it that. A handful of huts, a collapsed fence, and a well that looks more like a pit. It's been abandoned. Doors hang off hinges. Ash stains mark the sides of 2 buildings. One house is entirely blackened, nothing left but char and the ghost of smoke. Aldrich calls a halt. Raiders, no doubt. You dismount and follow him as he investigates the site. The silence is unnerving. No dogs, no children, not even birds now. Just wind and something else. A smell you can't quite place. Rot. You find the source behind one of the huts. A man, bound at the wrists, slumped against the wall. His face is blue-black. His mouth is open in a scream that never finished. Henry turns pale and covers his nose. You do the same. Aldrich doesn't flinch. "They wanted a message," he mutters. "They're mocking us." One of the knights spits. "This close to the Baron's lands?" Aldrich nods, jaw tight. They're not afraid. That's the problem. Fun historical fact. Villages like this were frequent targets during times of political instability. Mercenaries and outlaw bands often formed after wars ended, made up of trained soldiers with no jobs, no income, and a lot of pent-up aggression. Think medieval veterans with nothing to lose and pointy sticks to prove it. Fringe fact. Some knights turned to banditry themselves between wars, especially if they were broke or out of favour. Records show entire companies of rogue knights who roam the countryside, extorting villages, stealing livestock, and, ironically, offering protection from other bandits. There's scholarly debate over whether medieval law enforcement really existed outside major cities. In the countryside, it was more might makes right and less call the sheriff. Lords relied on loyal knights to keep order, but order often meant cracking skulls first and asking for taxes second. Back in the village, Aldrich orders a burial. You help dig. It's grim, brutal work. The earth frozen solid. You smash through it with borrowed tools, sweat steaming off you in clouds. Henry helps, his face tight and pale. You say nothing. You're learning quickly that words don't mean much here. That night you camp under a grove of old oaks. No tents, just blankets, cloaks, and a small fire you keep low. The sky's enormous overhead, a sweep of stars too bright to be real. You lie back and listen to the other knights grumble and snore. Henry speaks quietly beside you. You've changed. You glance at him. I mean, since the fall, he adds quickly. You look around more. Think before speaking. It's strange. You're not sure if it's a compliment or a warning. Probably both. Later you dream of the hangman's face and the village burning behind him. Morning doesn't wait for your nerves to recover. You're riding again before the sun's fully up. Your thighs scream with each bounce, but you grit your teeth and push through. Aldrich doesn't slow for anyone. If someone falls behind, too bad. By afternoon, you reach another manor, this one still intact, with smoke curling from chimneys, and a guard tower actually manned by a sleepy archer. Aldrich rides up and barks orders. You're allowed through. Inside the hall, the local lord, a nervous-looking man with too many rings and not enough chin, welcomes you with a feast. Sort of. The food is heavy on root vegetables, hard bread, and a suspicious meat pie. You eat anyway, because starving in armour is worse than food poisoning. As the other knights drink and argue about the next move, you sit near the hearth and stare into the flames. You're starting to feel the weight of it now. Not just the armour, but the expectation. You're a knight, which means people are going to look at you when the screaming starts, and sooner or later, it will start. Morning breaks the way it usually does in medieval England. Grey, damp, and full of reluctant chickens. You wake up sore, because apparently that's just your baseline now. The floor where you slept, bare boards near the hearth, is still warmer than outside, but not by much. A rooster screams like it's being exercised, and someone outside drops a bucket with a splash of slop and a curse. You sit up, flex your fingers, and realise that the cut on your palm, acquired yesterday while helping dig a grave, has started to scab. It itches, and you have no idea if there's anything remotely sanitary around here to keep it from getting infected. So you do the only reasonable thing, wrap it in a strip of what used to be part of your undertunic and hope the gods of questionable medicine are on your side. Henry appears like clockwork, bleary-eyed and holding a hunk of coarse bread. "I stole the softer half for you, milord," he says. "You appreciate it more than you probably should." After a quick cold splash of water on the face, you're out in the manor yard again. The men are already preparing to leave, so Aldrich has the kind of energy that suggests he gets angry when people breathe too loud. His horse looks just as irritable. As you mount up, Aldrich rides over and lowers his voice. "Scouts came in last night. The bandits aren't just passing through. They've set up camp in the old quarry." You blink. "Quarry?" He nods. "North of here. Abandoned for years. Deep pits, high walls, natural defence. Smart place to hide. Any idea how many?" He shrugs. "A dozen, maybe 20. Enough. Enough to kill you, probably." You ride out shortly after, your little war party now joined by a handful of men from the local lord's retinue. They look terrified. Understandable. The road north gets rough. Less a road, more a suggestion. Trees press in close. Branches like skeletal arms scraping at your armour. Birds scatter ahead of the group, shrieking like they know something you don't. By late afternoon, you reach a ridge overlooking the quarry. You all dismount and crawl forward on your bellies, armour clanking quietly despite your best efforts. From the edge, you peer down into the pit, and there they are, at least 20 men, maybe more, dirty, ragged, but armed. A few have crossbows, most wear bits of mismatched armour and carry swords that look stolen or scavenged. They've built crude tents against the quarry wall, and a central fire burns low, guarded by 2 sentries. Aldrich mutters, "They're organised." You ask, "Do we wait for reinforcements?" He gives you a look like you just asked if bread was real. "No time. They'll move by dawn. We strike now." You swallow hard, so this is it. Your first real fight. And not some glorious field charge with banners and trumpets. No, it's sneaking into a quarry at dusk to stab dirty men in the dark. Welcome to knighthood. You're given orders. Simple ones. Your group will flank the eastern edge, sneak down a narrow goat path, and wait for the signal. A flaming arrow shot into the sky. Aldrich and his group will charge from the front to cause chaos. You and yours will hit them from behind. Flawless. Or suicidal. Hard to tell. As you crouch behind a rock with Henry beside you, your sword in hand and your stomach trying to leave your body, you start to wonder if this is the last thing you'll ever see. The light is fading. The quarry walls glow orange with firelight. The sounds of night creep in. Owls, insects, the rustle of your own breath. Then, whoosh! A burning arrow arcs into the sky, trailing smoke and light like a firefly with ambition. Chaos explodes below. Aldrich charges in with a roar. Swords clash. Screams rise. You spring up and rush forward, half sliding down the goat path, sword raised like you actually know what you're doing. You don't, but fear makes you fast. You reach the first bandit before he sees you. You swing, too wide, too slow, but somehow you connect. He crumples. You don't stop to look. It's all blur after that. Steel, mud, blood. A man lunges at you and you parry wildly, almost losing your footing. Henry is beside you, swinging a short blade and screaming something incoherent. You back into a tent, trip, fall hard. A bandit rushes you and you thrust upward without thinking. The blade sinks into something soft. You wish it hadn't. When the dust clears, you're panting, trembling, and somehow still standing. The quarry is a mess. Smoke, blood, broken tents. Several of the knights are wounded. One lies still near the fire. You stare at him too long. Aldrich wipes his blade clean and surveys the scene. "Not bad," he says. You don't respond. Later, back at camp, you sit alone, your sword across your lap. It's stained dark now. You realise you never asked the name of the man you killed. You probably never will. Fun historical fact. Close combat in medieval times wasn't elegant. It was brutal. Knights trained for years, but once the armour was on and swords clanged in real battles, it was more about grit than grace. Fights ended fast. Most involved wrestling, crushing, stabbing through weak points. It was exhausting, terrifying, and very, very loud. Fringe fact. Some knights developed superstitions about their weapons, naming their swords, believing they had spirits inside them. Others refused to wear certain colours into battle, or carried bones of saints in their boots. As for debate, historians disagree on how much real combat most knights actually saw. Some fought in major campaigns. Others spent entire careers patrolling quiet roads and showing off at tournaments. The image of the knight as a battle-hardened warrior? That depends a lot on when and where you were knighted. You stare into the fire, armour still dusty, sword still unsheathed. You've survived your first battle. Barely. You're not sure how you feel. Proud. Sick. Alive. All you know is something in you has changed, and you can't go back. Morning doesn't so much arrive as stumble in on unsteady legs, dragging a fog behind it like a hungover pilgrim. The fire has long since gone out, reduced to cold ash. You wake up curled around your sword like it's a security blanket, your back aching from the uneven ground, and your right hand clenched into a fist that forgot to stop fighting. Henry's nearby, already up and trying to warm his fingers by cupping his breath. His face is pale, but he looks at you with something like admiration. or relief. Or maybe he's just surprised you're not dead. "Milord," he says quietly, "Sir Aldrich wants all knights at the fire pit." You groan and try to sit up. Your muscles creak like old door hinges. Everything smells like iron and smoke. Your tunic is stiff with sweat, and your boots, still damp. You don't even want to know from what. The group gathers around the dead fire, their breath misting in the chilly dawn. Some are bandaged, others blooded. One knight wears a sling made from his own cloak. No one jokes, no one brags. Aldrich stands before the group, arms crossed, his face carved from whatever stone gods used to sculpt bad moods. 2 dead, he says, 5 wounded. Everyone's silent. You don't know the names of the dead, you're not even sure if you met them. "But the quarry's ours," Aldrich continues. "The Baron will be pleased." He says it like that's supposed to matter, like it makes up for the knight who bled out near the campfire last night while everyone pretended not to look. Aldrich turns to you. You held your own. You nod because saying "I screamed and stabbed and hoped for the best" doesn't seem knightly enough. He grunts approval and walks off. That's as close to praise as you're going to get. Back at your saddle, Henry helps you pack. "I didn't think you'd survive," he says bluntly, tossing you a fresh jerkin. "Thanks," you mutter, not sure whether to feel insulted or flattered. You ride back toward your manor later that day. The group splits off in chunks, each knight returning to their own patch of feudal real estate. By the time you and Henry reach the edge of Turnbridge, the sun is low and golden, the trees stretching long, skeletal shadows across the road. Your manor appears just as you left it, slightly crooked, smoke curling from the chimney, chickens bullying each other near the gate. It's almost comforting. Almost. Inside, Osric is waiting with an expression that says, "I hope you're ready for nonsense." "You've returned," he says dryly, as if he didn't bet the pigs you'd never come back. "I did," you say. "What happened while I was gone?" He hands you a short list. The miller has barricaded himself inside the granary. The reeve quit and is apparently now a juggler. Someone stole all the candles from the chapel. And your cook demands hazard pay after an incident involving bees. You stare at the list. It stares back smugly. "I'll look into it," you say. "You always say that," Osric mutters, walking off. You retreat to the solar, a drafty upper chamber with a warped table and some cushions that have definitely seen better centuries. Henry brings a pot of something warm, and for a while you just sit soaking in the quiet, letting your bones settle back into non-fighting positions. Then the knock. Not loud, just soft and steady. 3 taps. You open the door and find a young woman standing there dressed in simple wool, her cloak spattered with dirt. She looks nervous, eyes darting past you to the hall beyond. "I was told you were fair," she says quickly, "or at least not cruel." You stare at her. Depends who you ask. She glances behind her, then steps inside, voice lowered. "I need help. My husband, he's been taken by men from Lord Harlow's manor. They say he poached a deer, but it's not true. They're going to hang him. You rub your temples, Lord Harlow. The name rings a bell. Big landholder to the south. Not quite your equal, but influential, and prone to solving problems with nooses. What do you want from me?" you ask. She hesitates. "A letter. Something from a knight, saying we're under your protection, that my husband's innocent." You should say no. This isn't your jurisdiction. Harlow could take offence, but you also remember the man at the quarry, tied up, blue-faced and broken. You nod. "I'll write it." Her eyes widen. "Truly?" You hand her the sealed parchment 10 minutes later, scrawled with all the authority you can fake and the wax crest you still barely know how to use. She bows deeply, thanks you in a whisper, and disappears into the night like a ghost wrapped in homespun. Fun historical fact. Medieval England had a justice system. Sort of. But it was wildly inconsistent, heavily biased, and often came down to who had power and who didn't. Lords and knights frequently handled disputes locally, especially in rural areas. That fair trial idea, don't count on it. Fringe fact. There were actual, recognised trials by combat where disputes could be settled with swords. Not as common as movies would have you think, but they did happen. There are records of people winning land by not dying fast enough. Debate time. Some scholars argue knights brought order to the countryside, acting as protectors and enforcers. Others argue they were the problem, using their status to bully, extort, or simply ignore the law. It varied wildly by region, personality, and how bored the knight was. That night, as you lie back on your itchy, lumpy bed, you think about the woman and her husband, about Aldrich and the quarry, about what it means to be a knight, not just the armour and the sword, but the fact that people look to you, expect something from you. Maybe fairness, maybe protection, maybe vengeance. You're not sure what kind of knight you are yet, but you're starting to realise the world is watching you figure it out. The next morning, you wake up to the sound of rain. Not the soft, romantic drizzle of movies. This is that sideways, cold kind of rain that soaks you before you even know it started. You roll out of bed and limp toward the shutters, prying them open just enough to see that the sky has decided on a solid grey. The manor yard is already a swamp. Chickens look personally offended. A goose stands guard in the puddles like it's daring someone to have a good day. You stretch, groan, and slap some water on your face. Everything hurts a little less than it did 2 days ago, which you assume means you're healing, or just getting used to permanent discomfort. Henry brings breakfast, a slab of hard cheese, yesterday's bread, and something that might have been a pear in its youth. "We've got visitors," he says casually, like that isn't a potentially life-altering sentence in medieval England. You blink. "Who?" He just jerks his thumb toward the great hall. The villagers, which is never ever good. You throw on something less murder-stained, grab your sword for the sake of appearances and make your way down to the hall. The fire is lit, crackling under a spit with exactly nothing on it. The room is crowded. Mostly peasants, damp and muddy, smelling of wet wool and resentment. Osric stands off to the side, arms crossed, lips pursed like he's already exhausted. Which, in fairness, he probably is. A middle-aged man steps forward. He's bald, missing 3 teeth, and dressed like a sack of potatoes had an identity crisis. "Milord," he says with a little bow that seems more out of habit than respect. "We come about the taxes." "Of course you do," you gesture for him to continue. "The harvest was poor," he says. "Worms got the barley, storm took half the wheat, and with the reeve gone, we've got no one to count proper." You glance at Osric. He sighs. They're late on their grain tithe, and 2 households didn't send men for your levy last week. You raise an eyebrow. "Because they were worm fighting and storm watching?" "Because," Osric says, "they think you're too new to do anything about it." "Ah." You look back at the villagers. They're not defiant, not angry, just tired. One woman holds a baby. Another clutches the hand of a wide-eyed child in a tunic so patched it's basically a quilt. "What do you propose?" you ask, genuinely curious what they think a knight's mercy looks like. The bald man clears his throat. "Postpone the tax. A fortnight. Let us bring in the winter rootstock first." You lean back in your chair. It's creaky, uneven and cold, but it's still a throne, kind of. You could say no, assert your authority, be the iron-fisted knight whose name echoes down generations. Or you could say yes and risk looking soft. Invite more delays, more defiance. You tap your fingers on the armrest, then say, 1 week. Then I send Osric to count your stocks. If it's as bad as you say, I'll halve the tithe. But if I find hidden grain, I collect double. Murmurs spread through the hall like spilled mead. The bald man bows again, lower this time. "Thank you, milord." They shuffle out. Osric waits until the door closes. "Not what I expected from you," he mutters. "Good or bad?" He shrugs. "Both, maybe." You sigh and rub your temples. What happened to the reeve again? Joined a travelling troupe. They juggle hedgehogs now. You stare. Osric shrugs. He wasn't good at math anyway. You spend the rest of the morning trudging through the manor's storage with Osric, inspecting the grain barrels, dried meats, preserved apples, and the terrifying array of pickled things. One barrel is just labelled fish in angry charcoal. You also tour the smithy where the blacksmith, Edric, a man built like a forge married a bear, shows you a sword he's been reworking. The hilt's too long, and the blade's seen better centuries, but it's got potential. You want a real edge put on it? He asks, testing the balance. You nod. Also, if you could not die before I need you in a fight, that'd be great. He grins, revealing one tooth, and goes back to hammering. That afternoon, you take a ride around the village outskirts. Henry trails behind you, muttering about mud and how nothing good ever happens when knights go for a ride. He's not wrong. You pass fields half ploughed and cottages half collapsed. A boy throws rocks at a crow. A woman pulls laundry off a hedge just in time to keep it from flying into a puddle. Everything here feels like it's trying to work, trying to hold together, trying to survive you honestly. You stop by the church, if it can be called that. It's more of a glorified shed with a wooden cross and a bell that sounds like someone hitting a cow with a ladle. Inside, the priest, Father Gilbert, is in the middle of what can only be described as a loud argument with himself. "Ah, Sir Knight," he says, spinning around with robes flapping. "You've returned from the war pit, have you?" "The quarry," you correct. "Of course. Any demons there?" "Just men," he snorts. "Same thing." You sit for a moment on a pew that wobbles dangerously. Father Gilbert eyes you carefully. You look older. Feel it. "You kill?" You hesitate, then nod. "Good," he says, and then adds softly, "bad, but also good. Helpful. You leave a few coins in the offering box, though you're 90% sure he's just going to use it to patch the hole in his roof with more wine. Fun, historical fact. Medieval clergy were a strange blend of spiritual guide, local gossip hub, and political tool. Some were educated and pious. Others were just the only guy in the village who could sort of read and wore a robe without tripping on it. Fringe fact. Some priests doubled as informants or even spies. There are accounts of clergymen helping rebels, shielding fugitives, or leaking confessions to nobles in exchange for coin. Divine right came with a human price tag. As for scholarly debate, there's a whole mess of argument over how much influence rural priests actually had. Some say they were central to village life. Others say they were glorified scarecrows with better costumes. Probably depends on whether you caught them sober. Back at the manor that evening, Henry's brushing your horse when he glances at you and says, "You know, people are watching." You raise an eyebrow. "Villagers, servants, even Osric. You're not what they expected." You wipe your sword with a cloth and sheath it with a soft shk. "No," you say. "I'm not." But then again, neither is this place. It's muddy and broken, full of small fires you keep putting out with increasingly wet boots. But it's yours, or at least it's pretending to be. And you're starting to care about whether it survives. You're awoken the next morning not by a rooster, or Henry, or even the usual soggy misery of medieval mornings. No, today it's a trumpet. A real one. Loud, brassy, and unforgivably cheerful for someone who hasn't even had warm ale yet. You lurch upright in bed, tangled in scratchy wool blankets, heart hammering like you overslept for an exam. The trumpet blares again. It's not a long call, just enough to scream something important is happening, followed by the unmistakable sound of horses, lots of them clattering into your courtyard. Henry slams into the room, breathless. "Milord, it's the tourney, or at least the summons." You blink. "Tourney?" "Yes, Baron Winthorpe's annual games. For glory, for honour, for, feasting." He pauses. "And potentially prize goats." You squint. "Goats? Big ones," he nods. "Prize winning." You stare at him for another beat, then sigh and reach for your boots. "Of course." Downstairs, Osric is already talking with a herald in a blue and gold tabard. The herald bows as you approach, a scroll in his gloved hand and a look that says he has memorized exactly one speech and will now deliver it regardless of context. "In the name of Baron Winthorpe," he intones, "you are hereby invited, nay, expected, to participate in the annual tournament of arms. to be held 7 days hence at Castle Winthorpe. Bring arms, armour and a retinue, and prepare to be tested in strength, honour and good Christian sport. He holds out the scroll. You take it, nod solemnly, and then ask the most knightly of questions. Will there be food? Several hogs, he says, completely serious, and at least 1 cart of cheese. Well then, once the herald departs, you stand there, the scroll still unfurled in your hand, and let the weight of it settle in. You've seen battle, you've issued taxes, you've narrowly avoided dying in a quarry. But a tournament? That's a whole different beast. It's not just about fighting, it's about being seen. This is where reputations are made, or shattered like bad pottery. Back in your chambers, Henry is already bouncing with excitement. You'll joust, of course, and sword, and oh, you'll need a crest. Do you have a crest? Please say yes. You do not. Not unless mild confusion and lower back pain can be heraldically symbolised. He starts sketching one anyway, muttering about dragons, shields, and possibly a goose. You leave him to it and head to the armoury, which is just a glorified shed. Your armour hangs in the corner like a disappointed parent. It's chipped in places, dented in others, and smells faintly of stress and wet iron. But you put it on anyway, piece by piece, like assembling the world's least comfortable puzzle. The next few days are a blur of preparation. You train with the local militia, such as it is. Most of them are farmers who treat spears like extremely aggressive broomsticks. You spar with Edric, the blacksmith, who fights like a man made of anvils and spite. You take laps around the manor yard in full gear until your legs scream. And every night, you soak in a tub of cold water, feeling like you've been kicked down a hill by time itself. The villagers notice. They come to watch. At first it's just a few. Kids sitting on barrels, old men muttering about form. Then more. Someone starts bringing cider. A girl sells roasted turnips. One kid tries to charge admission until Osric shuts it down. And suddenly you're not just a knight. You're their knight. Henry polishes your helmet like it's a holy relic. You're going to win, he says, not even as a question. You have to. You don't answer, because you don't know. You've killed men. But tourneys? Tourneys are different. Tourneys are part sport, part theatre, part politics. They're about showing off and showing up, and you've barely learned how not to fall off your horse. Fun historical fact. Medieval tournaments weren't just for fun. They were training grounds for war, high society networking events, and borderline blood sports. Knights used them to gain fame, fortune, and occasionally spouses. The rules varied wildly depending on where you were and how many nobles had money riding on the outcome. Fringe fact. Some knights specialised in tournaments and didn't even bother with real wars. These guys were essentially the rock stars of the chivalric world, collecting armour like baseball cards and travelling from event to event. One knight even had a book listing every opponent he'd unhorsed. There's historical debate about how chivalrous these events actually were. Some scholars claim tournaments upheld noble ideals and honour. Others argue they were chaotic brawls with minimal oversight, lots of cheating and frequent bribes. Sounds about right. The night before you leave, the manor throws a feast. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken, stale ale, and music played by a shepherd who can sort of handle a lute. But it's yours, your people, your moment. The villagers toast you. Even Osric raises a mug, and somewhere between the third slice of bread and the fourth off-key ballad, you realise something strange. You want to win. Not just for the cheese, not even for the goat, but because these people, these muddy, tired, wonderful people, believe you can. At dawn, your little caravan sets out. You ride in polished armour, thanks Henry, your makeshift crest flapping on a hastily sewn banner. Behind you, Edric drives a cart of weapons. 2 militia men march proudly, spears held upside down. Someone brought a chicken. The road stretches ahead, lined with trees dripping morning mist. The sky is pale, the air sharp with anticipation. And somewhere, not far ahead, is the field where your name will either be sung or hilariously mispronounced by a drunk herald in front of an audience of nobles. Either way you're going, the road to Castle Winthorpe starts scenic, then turns soggy, then decides it's done trying. You and your retinue, which now includes 2 spearmen, 1 goat, and a man who claims to be a champion of the longbow, but mostly just whistles off key, trudge through a landscape that looks like it gave up and turned into a puddle. Your horse hates it. You're not wild about it either. Henry somehow remains relentlessly upbeat. "I think this year's tourney is going to be different," he says as he adjusts your new crest. A red field with a white sword, flanked by what was supposed to be 2 ravens but looks more like disgruntled bats. "You've got a look about you." "What kind of look?" you ask, already regretting it. "Like you've seen things," he replies, "and you didn't flinch." You're flattered until you remember you did flinch. A lot. But if Henry wants to rewrite the legend, you won't stop him. After 2 days of travel, you crest a ridge and there it is, Castle Winthorpe. It rises from the mist like a stone titan, with 4 thick towers, banners flapping in the wind, and a surrounding village already buzzing with tents, carts and campfires. You spot knights in gleaming plate, squires running errands, cooks roasting entire pigs on spits. The air smells like sweat, smoke, and too many people in one place with something to prove. The outer bailey is chaos, horses rear, pages scream. Someone's already trying to sell lucky ribbons with questionable Latin written on them. You dismount, try to look like you belong, and hand your reins to a stable boy who instantly disappears into the crowd with your horse. You hope you'll see it again. A herald appears, dressed in blue and yellow livery, squinting at a long list. Name? You hesitate. "Sir Theorn." You still don't know how your name's spelled in this timeline, and honestly, neither does the herald. He frowns. "Turnbridge Knight?" You nod. He ticks a box. "You're in the list. Jousting and melee. Parade starts at noon. Don't be late." Henry beams. "You're official." You sigh. "Great. Now I just have to survive a joust." You're shown to your tent, not large, not luxurious, but at least it doesn't leak. Inside, Henry unpacks your armour while you try to remember how to not sweat through your underclothes in 5 minutes. Your chainmail smells like regret. You take a walk around the grounds, keeping your eyes open and your face neutral. Knights are everywhere, laughing, boasting, praying, sharpening blades. Some look like seasoned killers. Others are clearly here to marry rich or die trying. At one tent, a group is gambling with sheep bones. At another, someone's reciting poetry that rhymes valour with ale barrel. And then you see him, Sir Gavin. You don't know he's named Gavin, but if someone had asked you to pick the knight who smells of rose oil and fights like a fencing instructor with a flair for drama, yeah, Gavin. He's laughing with 2 other knights, all of them dressed in perfectly tailored surcoats with matching embroidered crests, golden lions and silver stars. His armour gleams like it's never seen actual blood. He catches you looking and nods, smug as a cat in cream. You nod back briefly, then keep walking. By noon, the tourney field is packed. Nobles sit in elevated pavilions, lords and ladies in finery so dazzling it probably counts as an attack on your retinas. The peasants crowd behind wooden barriers, cheering and jeering with equal enthusiasm. You're in full armour. Helmet tucked under one arm, horse, miraculously returned, stamping at the edge of the field. Henry adjusts your saddle one last time, muttering prayers and telling you to ride with your back straight, your teeth clenched, and absolutely no smiling. The parade begins. One by one, knights ride past the stands, raising lances in salute. Names are called out by a herald with dramatic flair. Sir Gregory of the Seven Streams, Lady Ellen the Blue, Sir Gavin of Greymere. The crowd cheers louder for some than others. When your name is announced, mangled of course, there's a polite smattering of claps and one shout of "Who?" You raise your lance and try not to drop it. After the parade, the field clears for the joust. You're matched first against a knight called the Boar of Borswick. He's large, his horse is large, his lance looks like it was carved from a tree that lost a fight with him. Henry hands you your helm. "No pressure, milord, but if you die, I've got no ride home." "Comforting," you mutter, then slide the helmet on and ride to your mark. The rules are simple. 3 passes, 1 point for hitting the shield, 2 for breaking the lance, 3 for unhorsing. First to 6 points wins. The horn blows, you kick forward, time slows. The world narrows to a thunder of hooves and a gleaming point charging at you. You aim for the centre mass and, crack, your lance hits. It snaps. Pain stabs your shoulder, but you're still in the saddle. The boar grunts, clearly surprised. Round 1, you. Second pass. Clang. He hits your shield full on. You reel, but stay mounted. Your own lance slides off his side. Round 2, him. Third pass. You grip tighter. Focus. Lean. Boom. You both hit, but he falls. The crowd roars. You sit there stunned as the boar rolls in the mud, flailing like a beetle in armour. You won. Henry's at your side a moment later, bouncing. "That was amazing. You look like a war god. Or maybe a sweaty angel." You manage a grin. Sir Gavin scowls from across the field, and just like that your name's being whispered. The Knight of Turnbridge. It has a ring to it, even if it sounds like something out of a bard's joke book. Fun historical fact. Jousting was originally a chaotic melee with few rules. Basically hit each other until someone stops moving. Over time it evolved into the highly ritualised sport we think of today. Helmets were reinforced, lances blunted, but injuries still common, deaths not rare. Fringe fact. Some knights had special tourney armour, heavier and less functional for real combat. One French knight had armour so thick he had to be hoisted onto his horse with a crane. Still lost. There's scholarly debate about the cultural value of tournaments. Were they military training, theatre for nobles, or a distraction from political unrest? Some say they helped maintain peace by letting aggression out in controlled bursts. Others say they just reinforced class divides and romanticised violence. But for now, you're 1 win in. Your name's on the board. The crowd is chanting something vaguely resembling your title, and across the field Sir Gavin is glaring at you like he's planning your funeral menu. Let the games begin. The next morning you wake to applause. Not for you, obviously. For the acrobat who's balancing on 2 chairs stacked on a barrel outside your tent, while juggling what appears to be 3 live chickens and a smoking pipe. A crowd has gathered. Henry claps enthusiastically from the sidelines, shouting, "He juggled 4 yesterday." You meanwhile sit on a campstool, still half-armoured and fully sore. There's a fresh bruise on your left side that looks like a map of Wales, and your right shoulder pops every time you move it. You can't tell if this is what winning feels like, or just surviving long enough to fake it. Henry jogs over as the crowd disperses, still glowing with post-juggling joy. "Today's the melee," he announces, practically bouncing. You groan. "Can't we just send the chicken juggler in my place?" He shakes his head. The melee's important. Big crowd, bigger gossip. Last year someone proposed marriage mid-swing. Was it accepted? Eventually, after some stitches. You finish your morning with a questionable meat pie and a brief, unfulfilling prayer at the Tuny Chapel. Even God, it seems, is busy during tournament season. By mid-morning the lists are posted. You scan them with dread and see your name slotted in Group C, between Sir Terrick the Dull and Lady Sabina of the Vine, who is rumoured to fight with a mace shaped like a swan. And then, of course, Sir Gavin is in Group C too, and of course he is. The melee rules are simple. 12 knights, 1 field, no horses. Blunted weapons only, but full armour required. Last one standing wins. And yes, they mean literally standing. Not conscious. Not mostly okay. Just not horizontal. Henry helps you suit up again, tugging your breastplate snug and checking the leather straps twice. "Remember," he says, "they can't kill you. Technically, but they can maim you." "Thanks, Henry." You walk to the field feeling like a very slow, very shiny beetle. The other knights gather at the edges, some chat, some stretch. Sir Terrick hums a dirge and eats a raw onion, which you take as a warning sign. Lady Sabina twirls her ridiculous bird mace with alarming speed, Then Sir Gavin saunters in. His armour gleams, his tabard is crisp, his nose is slightly red from a sunburn, which you find weirdly satisfying. He nods at you and says, "Hope you brought more than luck, Turnbridge." You offer him a smile that's all teeth and sarcasm. "I brought bruises. Want some?" Before he can respond, the horn sounds. And then it's chaos. The melee isn't like the joust. There's no order, no rhythm. Just armoured bodies slamming together in a storm of dull clangs, muffled curses, and the occasional unintentional dance move when someone slips in the mud. You keep moving, ducking and weaving, swinging your sword where it counts. You land a hit on a knight's shoulder. He stumbles, trips, and is immediately flattened by Lady Sabina, who roars like a pub bouncer on tax day. You parry a blow from Terrick, who grunts, "Nice form," before getting whacked in the knee by someone else, and then Gavin finds you. He's fast, faster than you expected. His blade rings off your shoulder with a jolt that nearly drops you. You stumble back and he follows, pressing the advantage. You block high, twist, and bring your pommel down toward his wrist. It glances off his gauntlet, but it buys you space. He circles. Not bad for a landless hedge knight. "I have a goat," you growl. He blinks, confused, and you take the opening. Low sweep. He blocks, but loses balance. You shoulder into him, sending him staggering back into a pile of overturned straw. He doesn't fall, but it's close. A chorus of "Oh!" rises from the crowd. You turn just in time to avoid Lady Sabina, who's down to one boot and no patience. You backpedal, ducking 2 more swings from a knight with a hammer, and then suddenly, miraculously, it's just you, Gavin, and Sabina. She laughs. "2 pretty boys and a one-legged swan, let's dance." Sabina lunges at Gavin. You hang back, let them tire each other out. Gavin disarms her, barely. She swings the swan mace one last time and tags him in the ribs, then collapses to one knee, breathing hard and grinning. "Done," she gasps, "but not broken." She yields. The horn blows. You and Gavin circle once more. You're both soaked in sweat. Mud clings to your boots. Breaths come fast. You feel your muscles screaming, your bruises stacking up like tavern debts. "End it," Gavin sneers, raising a sword. You do, not cleanly, not beautifully, just honestly. A feint to the left, a heavy shoulder check to the right, and a quick boot to his shin that throws him off balance. He goes down, not hard, but enough. The crowd explodes. You stand over him, chest heaving, sword lowered as he glares. Cheap. Effective! You help him up, because that's what knights are supposed to do. Later you're handed a sash of red and silver, marking your victory. Nobles murmur your name, correctly. Even Henry beams like you invented honour. And Sir Gavin? He bows to you stiffly in front of the crowd. It's not much, but it's something. Fun historical fact. Melees were often more dangerous than jousts. Dozens of armoured men swinging weapons in a field with little oversight. What could go wrong? Injuries were common, and deaths weren't unheard of, even with blunted blades. Fringe fact. Some knights wore secret cheetah armour. Extra reinforcement in places other knights didn't have, or even hidden spikes. One infamous knight lined the edge of his shield with tiny hooks, just to tangle his opponent's weapon. The scholarly debate. Some argue melees were serious military exercises simulating real battle conditions. Others say they were performative chaos designed for spectacle and noble bragging rights. As usual, why not both? That evening you sit in your tent, bandaged and bruised, with a mug of warm cider in one hand and a roasted onion in the other. Henry's polishing your gauntlets like they're holy relics. "You did it," he says. You raise your mug. "To surviving." He clinks his wooden cup against yours. "And to goats." "Big ones," you reply. You sleep the sleep of the battered but victorious. Deep, dreamless, and drooling into a straw pillow that smells vaguely of onions and triumph. When you finally crack your eyes open the next morning, the sun is already high, and your entire body has stiffened into the medieval version of rigor mortis. Henry, ever chipper, greets you with, "You snored like a thunder god last night." You grunt. He sets down a tray of breakfast. More roasted root vegetables, some cheese that might be fighting back, and a hunk of bread with a suspicious thumbprint in it. The steward of the tournament said Baron Winthorpe wishes to see you. That gets your attention. Me? You ask groggily. Did I offend someone important? Did I accidentally insult his daughter? Did I... Henry waves a hand. No, you're being recognised. Publicly. In the arena. After that melee? You're a crowd favourite. Everyone's talking about you. Even the minstrels are making up songs. Any of them good? Not especially. You get dressed in your finest, meaning your least blood-stained surcoat. With the patched-up crest, Henry insists still looks mysterious. He's even cleaned your boots. Well, brushed them with straw. But it's the thought that counts. The Baron's viewing platform overlooks the arena. As you approach, 2 guards part and let you climb the steps. It's just you, Henry a few paces behind, and a dozen nobles who've definitely already judged your entire bloodline based on your haircut. Baron Winthorpe sits at the centre, flanked by his advisors and, oh no, his daughter. She's young, maybe your age, maybe a bit younger. Dressed in embroidered silk that costs more than your manor, hair braided like it's auditioning for a tapestry, and looking at you with the half-curious, half-bored expression of someone evaluating a particularly clever goat. The Baron stands as you approach. Sir Knight, he begins, voice deep and measured. You've distinguished yourself in both the lists and the melee. Few knew your name before, all do now. You bow, deeply, carefully. You've practiced this one, he continues. Valour such as yours is to be recognised. I name you Defender of the Games, and grant you this. He gestures to a steward who steps forward with a cloak. Rich, heavy, deep blue with silver trim. It's not just fancy, it's symbolic. Only a few knights are named defenders each year. It's the Baron's way of saying, this one matters now. You kneel. The cloak is draped across your shoulders. The crowd in the stands below erupts into cheers, and you half expect to wake up in bed sticky with sweat and regret. But no, this is happening. Your service to this realm is not unnoticed, the Baron finishes. Rise, Sir Knight of Turnbridge. You rise. The Baron smiles. His daughter raises one eyebrow, just enough to make you extremely uncomfortable. Then the Baron leans closer, his voice dropping. A word of warning, Knight. Glory brings eyes, not all of them kind. You meet his gaze and nod. The look he gives you is not unfriendly, but it's not warm either. It's the gaze of a man who's seen glory turn to arrogance, and arrogance turn to rebellion. He gestures for you to enjoy the games, and with that the audience ends. You descend from the platform to find Henry practically vibrating with pride. Did you see that? The cloak? The applause? Did I mention the cloak? Yes, Henry, you mutter. You mentioned the cloak. You wear it for the rest of the day, mostly because you're too sore to take it off. You spend the afternoon wandering the tournament grounds with your new status trailing behind you like a rumour. People nod as you pass. Strangers clap you on the shoulder. Someone offers you a chicken leg just because. You catch sight of Sir Gavin at the edge of the archery field. He's with a small knot of nobles, but he steps away to intercept you. Knight of Turnbridge, he says dryly. Sir Gavin. He glances at the cloak. Defender of the Games, huh? You shrug. It was either that or a goat. For a moment he just watches you, expression unreadable. Then he says, You're not what I expected. Is that an insult or a compliment? Depends how long you last. Then he walks off. You don't know if that's a threat, a prediction, or a weird attempt at camaraderie, but it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, like sour ale or ambition. That evening, as the sun sets behind the castle towers and the fire pits flicker to life, you're invited to the post-tourney feast, which sounds fancy, but is really just a chance for the Baron to show off his wine reserves while watching knights stuff themselves like medieval raccoons. You're given a place not too far from the dais, where you can both see and be seen. A platter of roast duck lands in front of you. Next to that, a pile of onions stuffed with something suspicious. And then, of course, the goat. The The prize goat, it's alive, on a leash, wearing a tiny blue ribbon on one horn. Henry nearly faints from joy. The food is good, the wine better, but you drink sparingly, you've learned. One too many cups of spiced red, and you're either singing about your sword's feelings or asleep in a soup pot. Halfway through the feast, a bard stands and begins singing a ballad that is allegedly about the melee. The rhyme scheme is questionable. The tone wobbles between romantic epic and comedic farce. At one point, the lyrics describe you as a knight most lean, with a blade most mean, who kicked Sir Gavin's royal spleen. You nearly choke on your duck. Gavin, 2 tables over, does not laugh. You make a mental note to never trust a bard. Fun historical fact: bards and minstrels at tournaments weren't just for entertainment, they were also informal record keepers. Winning a joust might earn you a purse, but getting immortalised in song? That's how your name lived on, accurately or not. Fringe fact: some knights bribed bards to write favourable songs about them. One knight reportedly paid a minstrel in wine and velvet just to sing a ballad where he defeated 5 men single-handedly. The actual tally? He tripped over a pig and got disqualified. There's debate among historians about how much influence bardic songs had on a knight's real reputation. Some argue they were central to a knight's brand, especially among the illiterate. Others point out that most songs were wildly exaggerated, bordering on fan fiction. Again, sounds about right. As the feast winds down, you sit back in your chair, full, warm, and cloaked in your new title. You've survived the tourney, gained honour, made enemies, maybe even earned a song that doesn't start with a fart joke. But as the firelight flickers across the stone walls and the nobles start to slur their speeches, you can't shake the Baron's words. Glory brings eyes, and some of them are already watching. You leave the feast drunk, not on wine, because you were careful, but on attention, on applause, on the strange high that comes from people saying your name like it means something. The Knight of Turnbridge, Defender of the Games, that guy who kicked Gavin in the shin. The titles are stacking up, and with them, the weight. Henry trails behind you, humming the bard's song under his breath. With eyes of steel and goat beside, he sings. He fought with grace and wounded pride. Stop, you mutter. He doesn't. You make it back to your tent without tripping on anything except the goat's leash, and even that feels symbolic somehow. Henry tucks you in like he's your court-appointed older brother, places your helmet gently on its stand and whispers, "Sleep well, milord. Tomorrow we ride." "Ride where?" you mumble. "To your manor," he says. "Back home." You're not sure when it started feeling like home, but it does. Morning is harsher than it needs to be. You wake stiff, sore, and vaguely confused by the embroidered pillow under your head. Then you remember the feast, the cloak, the goat, currently asleep at your feet like an overgrown house cat. You rise, stretch, and wince as a pain in your hip reminds you that being hit with a blunt longsword is not, in fact, something the body forgives easily. Outside, Henry is already breaking camp. The sky is overcast but dry, and the tournament grounds are in full retreat. Tents coming down, carts creaking, and squires running around in various states of sleep deprivation and panic. You eat a quick breakfast of bread and what might be pickled onions, or possibly just onions someone left near vinegar, and mount up for the journey. Sir Gavin is nowhere to be seen, which is either a good sign or a very ominous one. You try not to read too much into it. The ride back is quieter than the one in. No fanfare, no trumpets. Just you, Henry, your slightly less smelly horse, and the goat, who has taken to riding in the cart like royalty. You pass fields gold with early winter wheat, a few travellers on foot, and the occasional broken wheel being angrily repaired by a man swearing at the sky. Henry updates you on local gossip between songs. "The miller's back," he says. "He claims to have been kidnapped by bandits, but Osric says he just drank himself into someone else's shed." You nod. "Oh, and a travelling preacher's been ranting about end times. Says the sky is cursed and the stars are fake." You glance upward. "I believe it." By midday, Your manor appears on the horizon. Your keep, still leaning slightly like it's drunk or suspicious of your choices, welcomes you with a sagging draw gate and the usual goose in the middle of the road daring you to cross. The villagers spot you first. A few wave. One kid shouts, "Is that the goat from the story?" and points excitedly. You dismount in the yard, stretch your legs and immediately regret it as your knees audibly complain. Osric meets you at the steps. He looks exactly the same. Grey, squinting, perpetually annoyed. But there's a flicker of something else behind his eyes when he says, "You're back." You sound surprised. I'm always surprised when knights come back with all their parts. Fair. He fills you in quickly. The grain stores are steady. The mill is running again, albeit slower. Father Gilbert had a theological dispute with a cow and now refuses to drink milk until the Pope personally apologises. You ask, "What about that woman? The one who asked for the letter?" Osric nods. Her husband was released. Lord Harlow didn't want trouble. Looks like your signature scared him off. You didn't expect that. Not really. You're used to the world ignoring you when it matters. Now, apparently it flinches. Inside, your chambers are just as you left them. Modest, chilly, and cluttered with scrolls you still don't understand. You hang the defender's cloak on a wooden peg, where it droops like a regal towel. You sit, breathe, you're home, and then the knock comes. Osric again, but this time with a letter, sealed in dark wax. The crest isn't one you recognise. "Messenger brought this an hour ago," he says. "Didn't wait." You break the seal. The letter is written in a narrow, elegant hand. To the Knight of Turnbridge, glory suits you, but beware what follows fame. There are eyes in the dark and not all wear crests. Your name is rising, that's when they pull the ladder. A friend. You read it twice. No signature. No location. Just that unsettling chill you've come to associate with things that can't be unsaid. Osric reads over your shoulder without shame. That's vague and creepy. Agreed. Do you have friends who write like that? No, but if I do, I want to send them a strongly worded goat. Later that night, you walk the perimeter of your manor walls, just to feel the stone under your feet, just to see if the world's still there. It is, for now. You pause near the North Tower and look out over the fields. Distant torches flicker from a traveller's camp. The sky is cloudless for once. Stars blink above you, indifferent and ancient. You think of the Baron's words again. Glory brings eyes. You think of the quarry, the bandits, the tourney, the goat. You think of Sir Gavin's glare, the Baron's warning, and now this letter. You don't know who wrote it, or why, but the unease settles in your gut like cold stew. Fun historical fact. Political intrigue among nobles was common in medieval England, especially among knights who rose too fast. Favour with a lord could mean land, titles and power. But it also meant enemies, whisper campaigns, assassins even, especially if you didn't play by the rules. Fringe fact? Some knights carried death tokens, rings, coins or cloth with their name on it, so if they were ever found dead under mysterious circumstances, the item would signal revenge. A medieval version of "If I die, tell everyone who did it." The debate? Some scholars believe chivalry masked a brutal power game, that knights who didn't navigate court politics carefully were eliminated, disgraced or worse. Others argue most of these stories are exaggerated, romanticised by later writers. Maybe, maybe not. You stand in the dark for a long time, listening, waiting. Because now, for the first time since you woke up in this world, you realise you're not just playing knight anymore, you're becoming one, and someone out there doesn't like it. You wake before dawn the next day, still feeling the chill of that anonymous letter in your bones. The world outside is wrapped in fog, thick, clinging, the kind that eats sound and makes familiar shapes seem strange. Your manor feels quieter than usual, not peaceful, just hushed, like something's watching, waiting for you to slip. You head to the training yard because that's what knights do when everything feels sideways. You swing your sword until your shoulders ache, then switch to your weaker side just to remind it that it's still part of the team. Henry shows up halfway through, holding 2 wooden practice swords and looking far too excited for someone who thinks breakfast is an optional luxury. "We're training, milord." "We already are." "No," he says, tossing you one of the wooden swords. "Now we're training." The next 20 minutes are mostly Henry getting whacked in the thigh and refusing to learn from it. But you have to admit, he's improving. He keeps his feet moving at least. His instincts are getting better, and despite his skinny frame and an apparent death wish, he's fast. Finally, after you manage to disarm him for the 4th time, he drops to one knee, panting. That counts as a win, right? You're not dead. Yet. You toss the swords aside and take a seat on the edge of the water barrel, splashing your face. The fog's still thick. You can barely see the manor's outer walls. That's when the shouting starts. One voice, panicked, then another, then the thunder of hooves. You and Henry are on your feet instantly. By the time you reach the front gate, Osric is already there, half-dressed, shouting at the guards to open the damn gate. A rider stumbles through the mist. Literally. The horse is lathered with sweat, sides heaving. The rider is barely upright, mud-splattered, cloak torn, one arm hanging limp. He sees you, and his eyes widen. "Milord, it's bad. It's real bad." You help him down. He collapses to his knees. "Bandits. North Road. Took the whole caravan. Slaughtered the escort. He swallows. They fly no banner, but they're armed. Trained like knights." You glance at Osric. He doesn't speak, just clenches his jaw. Henry's face has gone pale. "They're not just bandits, are they?" "No, they're not. This wasn't random." You hold a meeting in the Great Hall. Everyone's there. Osric, Henry, the steward, even the reeve, who apparently came back from his hedgehog juggling tour with a limp and a new respect for math. The villagers are tense, packed near the back. You step forward, still in half armour, cloak damp from the fog. "We've had a raid," you say. "North Road, a merchant caravan, under my protection, was attacked. Witnesses say it wasn't common bandits." The hall buzzes with fear. Whispers rise like smoke. You raise a hand. "We don't know who they are, but we do know this. They're organised. They're testing us. Testing me." Osric steps forward. "We can't field an army." "No," you say, "but we can make it very clear we're not prey." You dispatch scouts that afternoon, Edric the blacksmith among them, still surprisingly fast for a man who eats 3 loaves of bread a day. You double the guards at the manor. You start drilling your militia. Yes, even the ones who still think shields are optional. And you ride out yourself, inspecting the nearby villages, letting people see you, armed, alert. Word spreads fast. Within 2 days, a travelling merchant stops by just to deliver the latest gossip. They're saying you stood down a warband with nothing but your stare. You don't correct him. Let them talk. 3 days after the raid, the first body turns up. It's not one of yours, not a local, a stranger. Found hanging upside down from an ash tree on the North Road, armour stripped, throat slashed. Carved into the bark above him are 3 letters, VAE. You stare at the inscription for a long time. Osric beside you mutters, "Latin?" Henry answers, because of course he would, "Vae victis, woe to the vanquished." You nod. They're sending messages now, which means they want you to see, to react. You do. You bring the body down yourself, bury him properly, make sure the locals see you do it. That night, you have the letter brought out again, the one from the anonymous friend. You stare at it under candlelight, reading the lines over and over, not for what's there, but for what isn't. You're still thinking about it when Osric returns from a quick trip south. He brings news. Lord Harlow is mustering men, he says, claims it's for patrols, but I don't buy it. He's using this chaos. For what? To expand his reach. You sigh. Of course he is. Knights like Harlow don't need war to go to war. They just need a good excuse. Later, you sit in your solar with Henry polishing your vambraces. The fire crackles low, casting soft shadows. You're silent for a while before asking him, if someone were trying to unseat a knight, how would they do it? Henry doesn't look up. Depends. Is the knight popular? Getting there. Then they discredit him. Scandal, corruption, failure in battle. Get his people to stop trusting him. And if that doesn't work, Henry meets your gaze. They kill him. You nod. That's what you thought too. Fun historical fact. Night-on-night violence outside of war was surprisingly common. Land disputes, political rivalries, or just sheer spite led to assassinations, duels, and orchestrated accidents. If a nobleman wanted you gone, he didn't need an army, just a few good rumours and one sharp knife. Fringe fact. Some knights paid spies to infiltrate neighbouring manors, disguised as stable boys, guards, even monks. One famously posed as a travelling cheese merchant for 2 years. Nobody suspected a thing, until the cheese poisoned a banquet. There's historical debate about how structured medieval espionage actually was. Some scholars argue it was mostly informal, opportunistic, spies and messengers used ad hoc. Others believe more powerful lords had entire networks of informants, especially in unstable regions. Either way, it wasn't just swords and honour, it was whispers and fear, and now your name is echoing far enough to draw both. You stand and walk to the window looking out at your fields, at the crumbling walls, the tiny chapel, the villagers, all of it fragile, all of it yours. You clench your fists, let them come. But if they do, they're going to find out that the Knight of Turnbridge is a lot harder to knock down than he looks. The first thing you do the next morning is sharpen your sword. It's not for show. It's not because you think the edge will make a huge difference against whatever's coming. It's just the act of it. The rhythm. The soft shh of stone against steel, like some quiet promise being whispered into the blade. Henry watches you from across the room, sitting cross-legged with a book open on his lap. It's not one of yours. He borrowed it from the priest's library. The title in worn ink is On the Nature of Loyalty and Treachery in the Ranks of Men. Catchy. You're getting good at that, he says, not looking up. Good at sharpening, you mutter, and at being ready. That much is true. You don't sleep well. You eat without tasting. You've taken to riding the perimeter of your lands every evening, armour half done, sword at your side like a nervous tick. You nod to every farmer, speak to every watchman, not because you think you can stop something with a conversation, but because you want your people to see your face, your real face. Because someone out there is trying to make you into a story, a target, a rising name that needs knocking down, and you're not about to let them write the ending. By midday, a scout returns. His horse is limping. He's pale, mud-covered, and clearly rattled. They're camped in the woods to the north, he reports, breath catching in his throat. Not hiding, just waiting. Maybe 24, light armour, but trained. You frown. Colours? He shakes his head. None, but I saw a sigil. Briefly. Black field. White sunburst. Osric curses quietly behind you. Henry just frowns. You turn to them. What is it? Osric says, The white sun. That's no bandit crest. That's a knight's banner. Henry closes his book. Disgraced house from the western hills. Fought for the wrong side in the last rebellion. Lost everything. And now? Henry meets your gaze. Now they want it back. You stare out the window. The fog has cleared, but the world still feels heavy, tense, like the air is waiting for a blade to drop. You know what's happening now. This isn't just harassment, but it's a declaration. You're being tested, provoked. Someone's sending men with real training, disgraced knights, mercenaries with a personal grudge to stir your borders, challenge your authority, bleed your patience, and the worst part, they're close. Too close. You gather your captains in the Great Hall, what passes for a war council in your little corner of England. Osric, Edric, Henry, a few guards who know how to swing a blade without falling over, and Father Gilbert, who shows up uninvited and immediately pours himself a cup of your wine. They haven't attacked, Edric says, not directly, but that caravan raid, the dead man on the ash tree, that was no robbery. You nod. They're waiting for a reaction. Father Gilbert leans back in his chair. Then give them one. Everyone looks at him. He shrugs. I'm a priest. I deal in divine vengeance all the time. Osric says, we don't have enough men for open battle, not without calling for reinforcements. We don't need reinforcements, you say. We need to remind them that this land fights back. You propose the plan. It's not bold. It's reckless. A night raid. You and a handful of men into the forest. Hit their camp. Disrupt. Scatter. Capture if possible. Prove to them, and to anyone watching, that Turnbridge doesn't sit back while its borders bleed. The room goes quiet. Then Edric grins. About time. Henry swallows. I'll come. You look at him. You don't have to. I know, he says, but I want to. Father Gilbert raises his cup. You bring the sword, I'll bring the prayers. You hope to hell one of them works. The rest of the day passes in a blur of preparation. You gather supplies, sharpen weapons, check horses. Everyone's nervous but focused. You ride out after sunset, just 8 of you. No torches, just moonlight and mud. The woods are still. Too still. Henry rides beside you, eyes wide, breathing shallow. You wonder if this will break him. You wonder if it'll break you. You find the enemy camp just past the ravine. A cluster of tents, a low-burning fire, sentries posted sloppily. They are trained, but they're also cocky. That's your opening. You split the group. Edric leads the flanking team. You go in straight. On your signal, a low owl call, courtesy of Henry's unexpectedly accurate hooting, the raid begins. Steel flashes in the dark, screams, shouts. You slam into the first man with your shield, knock him flat and move on. Another swings wild. You duck, slash, feel the crunch of impact. You don't stop to see if he's dead. Henry is there, blade in hand, face pale but focused. He fends off a man nearly twice his size, ducking and weaving until Edric barrels in and ends it with a blow like a falling tree. The fight lasts less than 10 minutes, then it's over. You stand in the middle of the ruined camp panting, blood on your gauntlet, 5 bodies at your feet. One of the attackers survives. You drag him back to the manor and you ask questions. He's not eager to talk, but Edric knows how to loosen tongues. Gently, then not so gently. The man's a knight, or was. His name is Wulfric. No house anymore. Fought in the rebellion. Lost everything. Now he follows gold and orders. From whom? He doesn't say. But he does say this. You're not supposed to last. They were sure you'd fall before winter. You stare at him. Who? You ask. He spits. You nod to Edric. He talks. Eventually. Not a name, but a message. There's a noble in the south, Wulfric gasps. He wants Turnbridge, wants the Baron to doubt you, wants everyone to doubt you. You lean closer. Why? Because you're new, and because you're rising. Fun historical fact. Noble power plays weren't always about thrones and kings. Sometimes they were about land, strategic valleys, trade routes, forests with good hunting. A manor like yours, rising in reputation, close to power, was a ripe target. Fringe fact. Some lords paid outlawed knights to destabilise neighbours. They'd never acknowledge them openly. But these shadow knights could ruin crops, stir rebellion, or assassinate rivals, then vanish into the hills. The debate: was feudal England really as loyal and honour-bound as the stories suggest? Some say yes. Bonds of duty and vassalage were sacred. Others argue it was always transactional, that every knight had a price, that honour was just the currency you used until you could afford gold. Wulfric dies in the night. Knife in his ribs, not one of yours, but someone inside the manor. You wake to the news with a pit in your stomach. There's a traitor in your walls, and whoever they are, they're not done. You don't speak at first when you hear Wulfric is dead. You just stare at the body, his face slack, eyes wide, mouth slightly open like he was mid-sentence. The blanket covering him is already soaked in blood. Not a scuffle, not an accident. A clean knife between the ribs, fast and quiet. Too clean for a panicked peasant. This was a message. Osric stands beside you, arms crossed tight across his chest. He doesn't say, "I told you so," but it hangs in the air like smoke. Henry is quieter than usual. He looks shaken. The reality of it, that someone got this close, inside your manor, is sinking into all of you like cold rain. You ask the only question that matters. Who had access? Osric sighs. Nearly everyone. The guards, the servants, the kitchen staff. Gilbert. Me. Henry. Henry flinches. "You think I did it?" he blurts out too loud. You raise a hand. "No. But someone made sure we'd never get answers." You walk the hall that morning in full armour, even though it's uncomfortable, even though your neck still aches from the ride. It's not for protection. It's for the effect. You want people to see the Knight of Turnbridge walking the corridors like a storm in steel. Fear can be a tool. By mid-morning you've already questioned 6 people. No one saw anything. Everyone heard something. A scrape, a whisper, a shadow. All useless. The manor's stone walls echo too much, and loyalty is suddenly a very relative thing. You bring the guards in for inspection. Some are long-time locals, the sort who speak in single syllables and treat eye contact as a threat. Others were brought on after your first victory. Mercenaries, hired swords, temporary loyalty, temporary silence. You tell Osric to cut half of them. "Which half?" he asks. "The half I don't trust." "That's all of them." "Exactly." He doesn't argue. That night you sit in the chapel. Father Gilbert pours a cup of wine and lights a candle, then gestures dramatically to the rafters. "I have petitioned the Lord for answers," he says, "and all I got was indigestion." "You sure that wasn't the stew?" "Possibly both." You watch the flame dance for a moment. "Is it cowardice to be paranoid?" Gilbert raises a brow. "Paranoia is just realism in a sharper hat." You sigh and set the wine down. "I'm being hunted." Gilbert leans forward. "Yes? And?" You glance over at him. "You're a knight," he says. "Of course you're being hunted, that's the job." The next day the scouts return. Bad news, naturally. "The White Sun banner is gone," one of them says. "They've pulled back." You raise an eyebrow. "Retreating?" "No, relocating." And just like that, you know the next phase has begun. They tried intimidation, they tried brute force. Now comes the slow bleed, ambushes, false accusations, whispers, and worst of all, doubt. Because that's how you destroy a knight. Not with a sword, with questions. 3 days later, it arrives. The summons. A sealed letter bearing Baron Winthorpe's crest. Osric reads it first, then hands it to you with a face like week-old milk. The Baron wants you to answer accusations. Failure to protect trade, Osric says. Suspicion of harbouring rebels. There's even a line about unauthorised executions. You stare at the parchment like it might catch fire. Henry paces behind you. He can't believe this. Not after the tourney. Not after the cloak. He doesn't need to believe it, you mutter. He just needs enough people to question it. Because this isn't about truth. It's about politics. And someone is pulling the strings very well. You prepare to leave at dawn. You ride with only a small escort. Edric, Henry, and 2 guards you mostly trust. Osric stays behind to run the manor in your absence, but even he seems less confident now. "I'll keep the gates locked," he says, "and the goat fed." "Priorities," you reply dryly. He gives you a grim smile. Before you leave, Gilbert stops you in the yard. He presses a small iron pendant into your palm. It's warm from his hand. "A saint's charm?" you ask. "A bottle opener," he says, "but it might confuse the devil long enough for you to get a word in." You tuck it under your tunic. The ride to Winthorpe is quiet. Too quiet. No traders, no pilgrims, no carts. Just empty roads and the wind through naked trees. The kind of ride that makes you feel like you're being followed, even when you're not. You arrive at the castle by late afternoon. The guards at the gate nod, but without warmth. You're shown to a guest chamber, a stone room with no fire, no comforts, and just enough space to pace. The next morning you're brought before the Baron. It's not the Grand Hall this time. It's a side room, private, shadowed, and already occupied. 3 men sit at the long table, Baron Winthorpe, Lord Harlow, and a third, young, sharp-eyed and dressed in muted noble finery. You instantly dislike him. Winthorpe gestures for you to sit. You remain standing. "Sir Knight," he begins, "you've been accused of negligence, of harbouring outlaws, of undermining the authority of the realm." You raise an eyebrow. "By whom?" Lord Harlow leans forward. "Several concerned parties, including merchants who claim to have paid your men for protection they never received. Lies. All of it, but clever ones." You glance at the third man. He smiles. "I'm Sir Alric, advisor to Lord Harlow, and a long-time admirer of your rise." Translation: "I've been watching you, and now I'm here to take you down." You turn back to the Baron. "Do you believe this?" Winthorpe doesn't answer immediately. He's waiting. Watching. You realise with a jolt of clarity that this isn't a trial, it's a test. They want to see how you react, whether you lose your temper, whether you squirm, whether you reveal yourself. So you do the one thing they didn't expect. You smile. "Gentlemen," you say, voice calm, "if someone's trying to paint me as a traitor, they'll need a better brush." Fun historical fact. Accusations like this were a common political tool. Nobles who gained land or favour too quickly were often dragged before councils with vague charges and forced to defend themselves with honour, reputation, or, when that failed, swords. Fringe fact. In some cases, nobles were exiled without formal trial. Accusation alone was enough, especially if the accused couldn't muster enough allies to defend their name. There's scholarly debate about whether medieval justice was more corrupt or just more blunt. Some say it worked, slowly, inefficiently, but with enough ritual to keep people invested. Others argue it was a little more than theatre, where the outcome was often decided before the curtain even rose. You leave the hearing that day without sentence, but not without warning. As you step into the courtyard, Alric follows, and he leans close. "You're playing a dangerous game, Knight," he says. You don't turn. "Good." You mount your horse, look back only once, and then ride home. Because this isn't a game anymore, it's a war. And someone just gave you their name. The ride back to Turnbridge is long, wet, and ugly. Fitting for your mood. Grey clouds hang like damp wool above the treetops. The wind blows cold from the north, and even the goat in the cart refuses to make eye contact. You don't blame it. No sentence was passed at the Baron's court, but that doesn't mean you're off the hook. That wasn't justice. That was posturing. A warning with a velvet glove over its fist. And the moment Alric opened his mouth, you knew it. He's clever. Too polished to be a common noble. The kind of man who knows how to fight with words instead of swords, and probably thinks that makes him superior. You hate him. Not because he insulted you. He didn't need to, not directly. You hate him because he saw you, really saw you, and then dismissed you like a broken chair. Like someone who'd already served his narrative purpose. Which means you're getting dangerously close to being a problem for him. Good. By the time you reach your manor gates, your cloak is soaked through, and your boots are threatening to unionize. Osric meets you in the yard, face grim. "Milord," he says, wasting no time. "While you were gone, there was an incident." Of course there was. He leads you inside, past villagers whispering near the stables and guards keeping their hands a little too close to their hilts. "A man was found outside the granary," Osric explains. "Tied up, beaten. Said he came from the village of Duns Hollow to the east." You frown. "That's Harlow's land?" "Exactly." They bring the man in. He's bruised, muddy, and missing several teeth. His hands are wrapped in rough cloth and he winces with every movement, but he looks you in the eye when he speaks. "They told me to deliver a message," he croaks. "Said if I didn't, they'd hang my brother." You lean forward. "What was the message?" He swallows. "Leave. Leave Turnbridge. Go back to whatever ditch you crawled from, or they'll burn it all." Henry lets out a low whistle behind you. Osric just mutters, "Charming." You nod to the man. Have him fed, and seen to. No more threats get delivered on empty stomachs. That night you call a meeting in the Great Hall, not just your inner circle, but everyone. Farmers, blacksmiths, servants, even the boy who sweeps the floor and thinks your sword is magical because it whispers when it leaves the sheath. You stand at the head of the table in armour that still smells like wet horse and quiet rage. Let's not pretend we don't know what's happening, you say. We're being pushed. The room is silent, you continue. We've drawn attention. That's what happens when you win in public. That's what happens when you matter. And now they want to test us, see if we'll bend, see if we'll fall. You scan the faces in the room. People who once looked at you with polite confusion now look at you with something sharper. Fear, maybe. Or trust. Or that strange in-between emotion that happens when someone realises you're their best bad option. Let them test us, you say, voice low. They'll learn. You don't shout. You don't need to. They nod. Even the floor-sweeping boy. The next morning you ride out again. Not in secret, not with stealth. You make sure everyone sees you. You ride to Dunshollow. Henry tries to talk you out of it, mumbling something about reasonable plans and alive being better than heroic. But you wave him off. This is necessary, because the enemy is hiding behind implication and whispers, and you're about to deliver a message of your own. Dunshollow is smaller than Turnbridge, poorer, worn down like a boot heel. It sits in a shallow valley, surrounded by fields of rot and frostbitten sheep. A thin haze clings to the air, smoke from damp fires, cooking cabbage, or something less appetising. You're stopped at the edge of town by 3 guards in Harlow's colours. You dismount, they don't speak, you don't either. You hand them a scroll, sealed with your crest, such as it is. They don't open it, but they read your expression. One of them mutters, "We'll deliver it." "See that you do," you say. "I'll be watching." And then you ride back out, because you've made your point. They expect fear. They get defiance. The scroll, it says this: "To the esteemed Lord Harlow and those who act in his shadow, Turnbridge stands. It always has. It always will. If you want war, come for me. If you want peace, earn it. But if you touch another of my people, another trader, another farmer, another child, I will make sure the stories they sing of your fall are too obscene for the church to repeat." Sir Theorn, Knight of Turnbridge. You don't know if he'll laugh or rage or send someone in the night with poison, but you do know this: you're not hiding anymore. Fun historical fact. Openly challenging a more powerful lord was dangerous but not unheard of. If a knight had popular support, strong allies, or just enough luck, he could force negotiations or even secure protection from a higher power like the king or the church. Fringe fact. Some knights became folk heroes by defying authority. Local legends who robbed corrupt lords, protected the poor, or refused unjust orders. One knight, Sir Edric the Bastard, famously exiled himself after burning a tax collector's wagon and became a travelling champion of peasant causes. He was outlawed 3 times, executed 0. There's debate about whether the stories we have of these defiant knights are true, or just romantic fabrications written centuries later. Either way, they endured, which says something about what people wanted to believe about justice. Back at the manor, you find Gilbert standing by your gate. Had a vision, he says, unprompted, in the bath. You blink, you bathe? Rarely, he says, which is why visions hit harder. He leans in, saw smoke, saw stars falling, saw you on a horse made of fire. You stare at him, then say, "How much wine did you drink?" He doesn't answer. Instead, he pats your arm and walks off, humming the bard's song under his breath. You stand alone in your courtyard that night, cloak flapping in the wind, sword heavy on your hip. The moon is bright, the world is cold, but you're warm with something else. Resolve. You're not a placeholder anymore, not a lucky winner of a tourney, not a pretend knight wearing borrowed armour. You are the line. And now, with enemies watching, with blades sharpening in the dark and with doubt creeping in through every crack in your walls, you know exactly who you are and what you're willing to burn. You're woken in the middle of the night by the sound of steel, not the clean ring of a sword drawn with ceremony. No, This is something rougher. Metal scraping wood, followed by the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel. For a moment, your mind scrambles to place the sound. And then it hits you. It's inside the walls. You're out of bed before you're fully awake, reaching for your sword. Henry's already there, eyes wide, holding your cloak like it's a shield. "There's fightin'," he says. You hear it now. Shouts. A woman screaming. Then the low thunk of something heavy striking stone. You throw on your boots, sling your belt, and push out into the corridor. The manor's torch sconces flicker wildly, casting warped shadows. A door ahead swings open just as you pass. Gilbert emerges in his nightrobe and a helmet that's definitely ornamental. "Morning already?" he asks, bleary-eyed. "Get back inside," you snap. "Lovely, we're being murdered again." You don't have time for sarcasm. The sounds are moving toward the granary maybe, or the armory. You descend the main stairs 2 at a time, sword in hand, cloak flapping behind you like something out of a stained glass window. You burst into the courtyard just in time to see a figure vault over the wall. Not a bandit. A shadow in fitted mail, agile, quiet, too deliberate to be a common thief. Then another, and another. You bellow, "To arms!" And the courtyard erupts. The battle is fast, dirty and chaotic. This isn't a siege, it's a strike. Surgical. Someone planned this. They came for one thing, to hit you fast, maybe kill you, maybe steal something and get out before anyone could muster a proper defense. They weren't counting on you already being half awake and fully paranoid. You clash with the first invader near the stables. He's fast, but you're faster. You parry a slash and bring your sword down hard on his shoulder. The crunch is satisfying. He drops, groaning. Henry appears beside you a moment later with a pitchfork and 0 sense of self-preservation. "One of them's in the tower," he shouts. You sprint that way. Osric's already there, bleeding from a cut across the cheek, sword in one hand, torch in the other. He nods as you arrive. "2 went in, haven't come out." You don't hesitate. You push the door open and charge up the spiral steps. You reach the top and find one of them ransacking the archive room, a place barely anyone visits. Scrolls lie scattered, shelves overturned. He's looking for something. You don't give him the chance to explain. Your sword hits the back of his leg. He drops. The other one lunges from behind the curtain, but you expected it. You sidestep, spin, and slam him into the wall with your shoulder. Osric follows you in, panting. "They wanted records," you mutter. Osric looks around. No one steals tax ledgers unless they're desperate or really, really boring. You pick up a torn scroll. It's from your first week here. Names, holdings, bloodlines, and there, near the bottom, in ink faded with time, land granted in trust to the Knight of Turnbridge by Baron Winthorpe for services rendered in the rebellion. You stare at it. Services rendered. That's what all this is about, isn't it? Your rise wasn't random. You weren't just the new blood in a rusty title. You were rewarded, which means someone thinks you know more than you should. Or worse, someone thinks you have proof. By dawn, you've buried 4 intruders. 1 escaped. 2 are tied up in the cellar. 1 is already dead. His wounds too deep. Henry sits in the chapel, staring at his hands. He has blood on his tunic. Not his own. You kneel beside him. "You did well," you say. He doesn't answer. "You fought, Henry. You stood." Still nothing. Then quietly, "I killed someone." You don't say it wasn't his fault. You don't say it was righteous. You just rest your hand on his shoulder. "You protected this place," you whisper. He nods slowly and then, "Do you think it ever gets easier?" You lie. "Yes." Later you question the prisoners. They don't give names, but you recognize one of them. From the Baron's court. A guard. One of Harlow's men, dressed in darker gear, a different tabard, but the eyes don't change. You ask him one question. "Who sent you?" He smiles. "You already know." Then he bites his own tongue off. You stagger back as he gurgles and collapses. The other prisoner screams. You leave Osric to deal with him. You're done asking nicely. That afternoon you meet with your inner circle. You lay the scroll on the table. Someone wants this gone, you say. Gilbert squints at the parchment. Land rights, ancient blood debts. Oh good, bureaucracy and murder. Osric says, they think you were granted more than just land. They think you have a claim. You look up. Henry finishes the thought. A higher claim? Barony, or inheritance, or perhaps a name better forgotten. You don't know yet, but they think you do, and that makes you dangerous. So you do something even more dangerous. You write to Baron Winthorpe, you lay out the attack, the deaths, the scroll. You don't accuse anyone directly, but you make it very clear that someone is trying to rewrite your past, and you're not going to let them. You send the letter with your fastest rider, and you wait. Fun historical fact. Property claims in medieval England could be the cause of full-blown wars. Families fought over inheritance, forged documents, or contested grants. Entire battles were waged over who had the right to fish in a river or graze sheep on a hill. Fringe fact. Some knights hired monks to rewrite family trees, literally. One abbot was caught producing fake noble lineages for coin. He justified it by saying he was adjusting history to better match God's plan. There's debate about how accurate most medieval records really were. Fires, war, and pure laziness erased a lot. But when a knight had paper proof, parchment sealed and witnessed, it could challenge even the highest noble, or get you killed trying. That night you walk the outer wall of your manor alone. You feel different now, sharper, less like a visitor in someone else's life, more like the centre of something. There's no glory in this, no songs, no tournaments, but there's meaning. Real, dangerous, blood-stained meaning. And for the first time you understand what knights were truly made for. Not to sit in castles, but to stand between shadow and light, between tyranny and peace, between your people and the ones who think they can rule by fear. You grip the hilt of your sword and wait for the next move. The next move comes 3 days later. It arrives on foot. The rider sent to deliver your letter to Baron Winthorpe returns, without the horse, without the letter, and without all his teeth. He's alive somehow, but barely, one eye swollen shut and his arm bound in a blood-soaked sling. You meet him in the hall, surrounded by villagers pretending not to listen, and Henry trying not to panic. "They were waiting," the man rasps. "Ambush, at the bridge near Coldmere Ford." You know the place. It's the old border, barely patrolled, only marked by a leaning signpost and a very aggressive family of swans. But it's a choke point. Anyone wanting to intercept a message heading to the Baron would wait there. "Did they take the letter, you ask?" The man nods. "Didn't even read it. Burned it right there." Of course they did. It's not about interception. It's about erasure. If no word gets to Winthorpe, he stays in the dark. Maybe he assumes you're quiet because you're guilty. Maybe he assumes you're dead. Either works in your enemy's favour. Osric leans close. They've shut your road, cut your lines. You're boxed in. They're not declaring war, you say, they're trying to make us vanish. That night you don't sleep. You watch the road from your tower window. You imagine the men out there, watching, listening, tightening the net. This is what it feels like, isn't it? The beginning of the end. Except not your end. Because as you sit in the cold, watching the horizon, a plan starts to take shape. It's ugly. It's dangerous. But it might just work. You gather your closest allies the next morning. Osric, Henry, Edric the blacksmith, and Gilbert, who brings bread, 3 knives, and a hangover. You lay it out for them. They've blocked our roads. We can't reach the Baron. We can't get word to the capital. We're isolated. Osric nods, and they're hoping we make a mistake. You grin. Let's give them one. The room goes quiet. Henry looks nervous. Is this a real plan, or one of those distract them while we die bravely plans? Both, you say. Neat. You explain. You'll make it look like you're falling back, retreating, that the manor is being quietly abandoned. Pull the guards from the walls. Send servants to nearby villages with rumours that you've gone south, or been called away. Meanwhile, you add, we dig in, tight, silent, and when they come to take the place, Edric grins. We spring the trap. Gilbert raises a hand. And if they don't fall for it, you shrug. Then I've just made us look weak in the face of an enemy who already thinks we are. No real change. He nods. Fair. It takes 2 days to prepare. You leave a few gates open just wide enough to look like a mistake. Douse the torches early. Plant rumours in nearby markets. Pull most of your people inside the manor and reinforce the cellars like it's a siege. And then you wait. You sit in the shadows, sword across your knees, trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. Henry beside you keeps whispering strategies. Should we have dug a pit trap? We don't have time. Could we borrow one? You glance over. Borrow a pit? He shrugs. From a neighbour? You sigh. Let's just see who shows up first. They come on the 3rd night. Not a full army. Just enough to sweep a supposedly empty manor. Fast-moving figures in dark gear. No banners, no torchlight. Just blades and intent. You watch them from the upper balcony. They spread out, check the yard, move toward the main doors, and then you strike. Arrows first, then smoke, then you. You come down the steps like a thunderclap, sword raised, cloak trailing like a shadow's echo. Your people erupt from hiding. Edric barrels through the gate with a hammer so large it should be considered a bludgeoning crime. Henry fights with terrifying focus, darting between legs like a squirrel with vengeance issues. Even Gilbert joins in, swinging a staff and shouting something about divine tax collection. It's not a battle. It's a message. You don't fight to kill. You fight to let them live long enough to run back and report. The survivors, those who aren't unconscious or too bruised to remember their mother's name, stumble off into the dark, leaving behind shattered shields and blood in the mud. By sunrise, you're standing in the yard, face streaked with ash, hair stuck to your brow and half your cloak torn. Henry walks over, eyes wide. We won. Kind of, you reply, more like we didn't lose. He grins. I'll take it. Osric joins you, holding a scrap of cloth in his hand, black with a faint sunburst embroidered in white. The white sun again, he mutters. They keep sending the same message. You nod. Then it's time we respond. You send a rider that day. Not one of yours. You send the captured enemy scout, patched up, bruised, but very much alive, with a letter tied to his belt. You let him go. Because fear isn't the only tool. Reputation matters too. The letter says, I see you now. I know your games, I know your shadows, I know your tactics, and they failed. This land is not yours. My people are not yours. My name is not yours to decide. If you want Turnbridge, come take it with your face uncovered, or go back to whatever hole you crawled from and pray I never come looking. Sir Theon. You know they'll read it, and maybe, just maybe, they'll understand. You're not the scared, isolated knight they expected. You're the storm they just called down. Fun historical fact. Medieval warfare was often asymmetrical. Castles weren't always taken by brute force. Many were captured by deception, psychological games, or, more often than anyone likes to admit, boring sieges. Fringe fact. There was one recorded case where an entire castle was taken because a steward left the gate open while drunk. The attacking lord marched in, took the kitchens and declared victory before anyone woke up. There's scholarly debate about how much influence individual knights really had in these kinds of situations. Some argue that leadership like yours, a single charismatic figure rallying locals, was rare. Others say it happened more than we think, but the stories were lost, overwritten by nobles who didn't want the world remembering that courage often wasn't hereditary. That night you find yourself back on the wall, watching again, but this time there's no doubt in your chest. No dread, only fire. They wanted to isolate you, but they underestimated what you could become when cornered. Not prey, not a pawn, a problem. And problems don't go away, so they dig in and they hold. You know it's coming before the horn sound. You've seen the signs for days. Birds startled into silence, smoke rising from somewhere it shouldn't. Villagers who've gone missing and haven't come back. Even the goat's been restless, pacing in its pen and glaring at you like it knows something you don't. Which, frankly, wouldn't be surprising. At dawn, the lookout on the east tower gives the cry, "Flags on the ridge!" You're up already, haven't really slept. You grab your cloak, your sword, and your increasingly annoyed war face, and head up the wall. There, on the far ridge, just visible through the morning mist, a line of riders waits. Not attacking, just standing, watching, and flying a banner you know too well by now. A white sun on black. They're not hiding anymore, they're coming. By midday, their advance guard arrives at your border. 20, maybe 30 riders. Chainmail, real shields, trained horses. Not bandits, not rabble, knights, or former ones. The kind who fight for coin, not cause. The kind who've been thrown out of other places and now wear their shame like armour. You watch from the walls as they set up a camp just outside bow range. Osric stands beside you, squinting. You think they're waiting for night? No, you say. They're waiting for us to blink. And maybe, just maybe, they're hoping you'll open the gates. That you'll surrender. That you'll accept that this was all temporary. That your little rebellion against obscurity, your rise from nothing, is done. They're going to be disappointed. That night you sit in the hall surrounded by everyone who still believes in you. It's a small group. Osric, Henry, Gilbert, Edric, a handful of loyal guards, one baker with excellent aim, and the goat who has somehow gained a following and now refuses to sleep unless someone sings to it. You stand at the head of the table. No illusions, you say. They're here to break us. No one argues. This isn't about politics anymore, or power, or even land. This is about removal, about scrubbing out the name Turnbridge from the record like it never mattered. Gilbert mutters, "Bit dramatic." You ignore him. We fight because we're the last thing standing between our people and the lie they want to replace us with. We hold, not because it's easy or even smart, but because this is ours. And I don't care if they send 50 or 500 or 1,000. They're not taking this place without paying in blood. Henry swallows hard but nods. Edric thumps his hammer against the floor. The baker loads a pie with what might be rocks. You add quietly, "And if I fall," someone else picks up the sword. A beat of silence. Then Gilbert raises his wine cup. "And I'll say the funeral mass with flair." That's the closest thing to a compliment you're going to get from him. You spend the next day reinforcing the walls. Edric and Henry set traps. Holes filled with caltrops, false doors, hidden flasks of boiling oil. You assign archers to key spots, restock the armoury, move the villagers into the manor's safest sections. No one runs, even the ones who probably should stay and fight. Because somehow, you've made this place mean something. Not just a pile of stone and a couple of goats, but a stand, a symbol. Turnbridge, the unbent. The first attack comes at dusk. They test your walls. Fast mobile riders trying to draw your archers out, expose weaknesses, and it doesn't work. You let them push just far enough. Then you answer with arrows, a sally from the side gate, and Gilbert dropping what might have been a blessed chamber pot from the tower. They lose 3. You lose none. You sleep a little easier that night. Then comes the letter, delivered by a single rider under truce wearing a fancy sash that says, "I'm very important, but not in a combat way." You meet him at the gate. He bows low and presents the sealed scroll, smug as anything. You break it open and read, "To the Knight of Turnbridge. This land was never yours. It was given in error, claimed by mistake, and held by defiance. You're not a lord. You're not a ruler. You are an echo. Leave now, and I will let your people live. Stay, and you will burn with your lies." Sir Alric of Norwin, on behalf of the House of Harlow, you read it once, then you hand it back to the messenger. "Tell your master," you say, "that I don't burn easy." The man gulps and rides off. That night, you sharpen your blade, not just because it needs it, because it calms you. Henry sits nearby, oiling chainmail. "Do you think they really believe what they're saying?" he asks. "That this land was never ours?" You nod. "Because it scares them if it was." "Why?" "Because it means power doesn't always flow down." He frowns. "It means someone like me," you continue, "can build something that matters. Not because I was born into it, but because I fought for it." Henry doesn't reply, but the way he grips his dagger after that says plenty. Then comes the second attack. It's not a probe this time, it's war. They hit at midnight. Scaling ladders, fire arrows, ram at the north gate. You're everywhere. On the wall, in the yard, at the breach near the stables where 3 mercenaries made it through before Edric caved in the passage with a mallet the size of a small tree. Blood slicks the stone. Your sword arm goes numb. Henry gets a gash across the thigh but keeps fighting, limping and shouting something very brave and slightly obscene. You lose 2 guards, and then it's over. The enemy falls back. They leave 10 dead behind. You leave them hanging from the trees outside the wall, not as cruelty, as message. At dawn, you stand over the gate, blood drying on your armour. Your people cheer. The sun rises, blood orange, and you realise as you're still here. Somehow, still standing, still breathing, still you. They came to erase you, but you're not a name on a scroll, you're a knight. And now you're legend. Your hands shake for hours after the battle. Not from fear. That left some time around the second wave of attackers, when you realised they were more afraid of your people than you were of theirs. No, what shakes now is something deeper, stranger. The aftermath, the adrenaline fallout, the weight of knowing you lived again. You take a bath, not by choice. Henry orders it, which is a strange reversal of roles you don't have the energy to fight. The blood's not even yours, he mutters, scrubbing a gauntlet like it insulted his lineage. You soak in near scalding water, staring at the ceiling beams, wondering if this is what it means to survive something important. Exhaustion so deep it feels like a second skeleton. Later, wrapped in a robe and shamefully soft slippers, Gilbert's idea, you sit by the hearth and drink something warm and spiced. It might be wine, it might be broth, it might be goat milk. At this point, you're beyond caring. That's when Osric walks in holding a scroll. You groan. If that's bad news, set it on fire and tell me in the morning. He doesn't. He tosses it into your lap instead. You're going to want to see this one. You unroll it. It's another letter, but this one isn't from Harlow. It's not even from Alric. It's from Baron Winthorpe, and for once, it doesn't begin with a threat. Sir Theona, I have heard troubling things, conflicting reports, rumours of rebellion, of heroics, of victories where none were expected. I require the truth. Come to court, in person. Bring evidence. If what I suspect is true, this may be your chance not only to defend yourself, but to rise. You read it 3 times. Then you set it down very slowly. He's calling me to the capital, you say. Osric nods. Not for punishment. No, you say standing, for confirmation. You call a council that night. Everyone gathers in the great hall again. Same war-torn faces. Same firelight flickering off stone and steel. Except this time, something's changed. They're not waiting for orders anymore. They're waiting for your decision. You hold the letter up. The Baron wants to see me, personally. Says I have a chance to clear my name. Henry frowns. Or walk into a trap. Possibly, you admit. But if I don't go, he'll believe the rumours. That I'm hiding. That I've turned this manor into a rogue stronghold. Which you kind of have, Gilbert notes. You glare at him. He raises a wine jug and backs up. Look, you continue. If I go, I might die. If I don't go, everything we've built will rot. Edric says, so what's the plan? You tell them. It's reckless. It's theatrical. It involves dressing like a noble and walking straight into the lion's mouth with 2 guards, a goat, and a scroll case full of half-burned documents. Henry naturally volunteers to come. I'm not letting you ride into doom without someone to tell your story, he says, only half joking. Osric sighs. Fine, but I'm not cleaning up after the goat if it misbehaves in front of a baron. You leave at dawn. 3 riders, 1 cart, 1 goat, wearing what might be a ceremonial scarf. The road is quiet, but you take the long route, avoiding known watch points and patrolling woods that have gone far too quiet lately. You pass a few travelling monks, 1 merchant caravan, a nervous tanner who swears he saw wolves with human eyes. You don't ask. By the 3rd day, the capital is in view. Winthorpe's seat. Silvermere. It rises like a storybook city. Stone towers, bustling markets, banners flapping in the breeze, and behind it, the Baron's keep, proud and angular, framed by early winter sunlight. You feel your stomach drop. Still time to fake the flu, Henry says. You dismount. Let's get this over with. The court is busier than you expect. Nobles in silks, merchants in fur-lined cloaks, bored courtiers sipping wine at impossible hours of the day. You draw eyes, not just for your armour, but for your name. You hear it whispered as you pass. The Knight of Turnbridge, the bandit bane, the rebel. You try not to flinch. You're ushered into the grand chamber, a vaulted hall lined with columns and the smell of incense and ambition. Baron Winthorpe sits at the far end, wearing his usual layers of dignity and mild contempt. But there's curiosity in his eyes. Beside him, Alric. Still smug, still sharp. He doesn't even blink when you enter. This isn't surprise. This is Act 2. The Baron gestures for silence. Sir Theorn, he says, voice echoing. You stand accused of operating outside your authority, harbouring fugitives and attacking loyal subjects of the crown. You bow, just enough to pass as respectful. And I bring my defence. You unroll the scrolls, parchments rescued from your archive, burned edges and all. They show the land grants, the original seal of the Baron himself, the name Winthorpe, in clear ink. More importantly, you present witnesses. Henry, who recounts the attack. Osric, who delivers a quiet, lethal summary of the assassination attempts. Even Gilbert, who somehow manages to sound both drunk and persuasive as he describes how you single-handedly ended a siege while fasting. Finally, you look at the Baron. I don't claim to be a perfect knight, you say, but I fought for that land, I protected it, and I bled for it. You take a breath. I didn't rise by chance. I rose because no one else would stand up. And now someone wants me erased for it. You turn slightly, gaze locking on Alric. And he knows it! A murmur runs through the hall. Alric stays perfectly still. Winthorpe lifts a hand. Enough. You wait in silence. For hours. They deliberate in private. Servants bring you stale bread and weak wine. Henry paces. Osric cleans his dagger. Gilbert naps under a statue of Saint something or other. Finally you're called back. The Baron stands. Sir Theorn, he says, your defence is compelling. The charges, suspect. He pauses. And your name is rising. You brace for the blow. Then, I hereby name you Warden of Turnbridge, official steward of the border, landholder, knight of record. You blink. He's not punishing you. He's promoting you. You don't smile. Not yet. Because behind the formality, behind the applause from the nobles suddenly pretending they liked you the whole time, there's something darker. Ulrich is still here. Still calm. Still quiet. This wasn't his endgame. It was just another move, and you've stepped right into it. Fun historical fact. Titles like Warden were often given to knights who managed unstable or violent regions. Part praise, part curse. It meant more power, yes, but also more responsibility and more enemies. Fringe fact? One knight, after being promoted to Lord Warden of a troubled valley, had 19 assassination attempts in the span of 2 years. He survived them all. Died of spoiled fish. There's scholarly debate about how much influence barons truly had over knightly appointments. Some say they acted independently. Others believe they were always influenced. By the crown, by marriage alliances, by unseen hands in the court. And you're no longer unseen. You're a piece on the board. A knight, yes, but now, officially, a threat. The journey back from Silvermere feels different. You ride the same roads, past the same trees, hear the same wind in the branches. But everything's changed now, hasn't it? You left Turnbridge as a disputed knight with a scrappy reputation and a sword held together with more luck than steel. You return as Warden, a title that means nothing to some and everything to others, especially your enemies. They didn't want you elevated, they wanted you erased, and now you're sitting a little taller in the saddle, the weight of that new authority pressing on your shoulders like an invisible crown. Beside you, Henry's unusually quiet, which is how you know he's panicking. Finally he blurts out, "We're going to die, aren't we?" You glance over. You'll have to narrow that down. This title, it's like painting a target on your back with gold leaf and yelling, 'Come shoot me,' in 3 languages. You smile. Then we better make sure we're worth missing. Turnbridge greets you like a story ending in triumph. Not the fairy tale kind. The earned kind. You cross the drawbridge under fluttering flags. Your banner, modest but proud. The people line the walls. Some cheer, some bow. A few throw vegetables, but mostly because they thought it was a custom. Osric meets you at the gate with a raised eyebrow. "You're not dead," he says. "Not yet," you reply, and hand him the official scroll bearing your new title. He doesn't smile, but he does nod. And for Osric, that's basically a full-on parade. "You know what this means," he says quietly. "I'm guessing less sleep, more paperwork." He leans in. "It means they'll stop hiding. Harlow, Alric, whoever else's hands are in this. Now that the Baron's recognised you, they have to make a move." You know he's right. The only thing more dangerous than a knight with something to prove, a knight with something to lose. You settle into your new role quickly. Too quickly. Land surveys, tax records, trade approvals, petitioners lining up to complain about everything from overgrown hedges to ghosts in the mill. You send Gilbert for that one. He returns with a suspiciously full wineskin and no ghost. But with all the routine comes something else. Order. The people of Turnbridge begin to walk straighter. The guards train harder. The fields are better protected, the roads safer. You're not just a symbol now, you're a ruler. And ruling, you discover, is mostly about balance. Every decision is a scale. Justice versus mercy. Security versus freedom. Sword versus olive branch. Some days you get it right. Others, not so much. Like the time 2 farmers accuse each other of sheep theft and you accidentally reassign both flocks to the wrong owners. You solve it by buying both sheep and giving them to the chapel as divine livestock. Gilbert names them Saints Bartholomew and Eugenius. It's not perfect, but it works. Then, one night, a raven lands on your window. Tied to its leg is a scrap of parchment. Old. Rushed handwriting. No seal, just 4 words. Ulrich moves at dusk. You stare at it for a long time. Dusk? When? Where? Who wrote this? The handwriting is familiar but not recent. Henry peers over your shoulder. Could be a trap. Probably is. Are we going anyway? You nod. Obviously. You ride out with Osric and Henry. No banners, no fanfare. Just steel and silence and that tight knot in your stomach that says this is either very clever or very, very dumb. You head east, toward the old watchtower ruins near Hollowmere. You've passed them before. Crumbled walls, moss-covered stones, a half-standing tower like a crooked finger pointed at the sky. And that's where you find them. Not just Alric, an entire council. 5 nobles, 2 knights in full armour. A map spread across a stone slab. Alric at the centre, gesturing like he owns the world. You crouch behind a ridge and listen. If we move before the first frost, he says, we can strike before Winthorpe receives the next tax levy. Turnbridge falls, the warden is discredited, and we divide the holdings before winter tightens its grip. One of the knights grunts. The Baron named him directly. He can be unnamed, Alric snaps, or removed. Quietly, or publicly. Either way, the crown won't blink unless we give them reason to. You feel Henry stiffen beside you. You whisper, "Get back to the horses, tell Edric, prepare the defence." "What about you?" he whispers. "I'm going to say hello." You don't attack. Not yet. You appear. You walk out of the trees like a ghost, cloak swirling, eyes locked on Alric. He sees you, and for once he flinches. "Sir Alric," you say, calm as snow. "Planning another hunting trip?" The nobles freeze. Knights draw swords. You raise a hand. "Please, no need for drama. I just wanted to hear it from the source. The ambition, the desperation, the plans made by cowards behind crumbling stone." One of the nobles steps forward. "You have no right to—" You cut him off. "I have every right. You see, I don't just hold Turnbridge. I earned it. While you were feasting, I was fighting. While you were plotting, I was bleeding. You take one step closer, and they don't stop you. Tell your lords, tell your friends. Turnbridge isn't falling, not tonight, not ever. And if you want my blood, you'd better send more than whispers and parchment. Alaric says nothing. His face is stone, but his hand is tight on the pommel of his sword. You turn and walk away. Because sometimes the most dangerous move is not drawing your blade. You return to Turnbridge that night. You post double guards. You alert your allies. You begin fortifying. Not because an attack is coming, but because now you've dared them. And people like Alaric never resist a dare. Fun historical fact. Medieval politics weren't just fought on battlefields. They were fought in ruins, in forests, in castle gardens. Secret councils were a regular occurrence, often convened in neutral locations to avoid open conflict and witnesses. Fringe fact. One council in Wales was famously disrupted when a local shepherd mistook the gathering for a wedding feast and tried to marry off his daughter to the heir of a major noble house. They didn't go through with it, officially. There's debate among historians about just how much influence unlanded knights really held. Some argue they were pawns, tools of greater men. Others suggest that in times of instability, a single knight with land, loyalty and local support could sway entire regions. You're becoming that knight, and you're not done yet. It begins with a priest at your gate, not Gilbert. He's inside, currently attempting to exorcise a stubborn pigeon from the chapel tower, using song and a suspicious amount of vinegar. No, this priest is a stranger, tall and solemn, wrapped in a rain-slick cloak, eyes like old candle smoke. He bows low, introduces himself as Father Wren, and hands you a sealed scroll, red wax, no crest, just a symbol, a sunburst, white on black. You don't open it right away. Instead, you take him inside, offer him a seat, wine, and a chance to explain what in the name of St. Hiccups he's doing delivering enemy messages to your front door. Father Wren takes a slow sip of wine, red, from your best bottle, and smiles thinly. I am not a messenger, he says, but a witness, a mirror. Of what, you ask? Of what comes next? Okay, definitely a cult priest. You open the scroll. It's not a threat exactly, more like prophecy. You cannot hold Turnbridge. You were never meant to. The land remembers true blood. The people remember true rule. Your legacy is a sandcastle in rising tide. We are the tide. Underneath a single name. Housethorn, you sit back. Well, that's new. You pull your council together. Even Gilbert. The pigeon is still winning, so he's glad for the break. You lay the scroll out on the table. Everyone leans in. Osric reads it twice, then mutters, Thorn? Haven't heard that name in years. Henry frowns. Weren't they one of the old houses before the rebellion? You nod. Disgraced? Stripped of lands? Some say they supported the losing claimant. Gilbert pours wine. Some say they poisoned 3 kings and a pope. They didn't, you reply. Right. 2 kings and a bishop. My mistake. You look back at the scroll, so this is what it's really been about. Not just Alaric, not just Harlow, Housethorn, a ghost house clawing its way back to the surface. And Turnbridge, your little corner of borderland mud and barley, is their foothold. The next day you dig into the archives, the ones that didn't burn, the ones Wulfric's men missed. You spend hours combing through old grants, faded sigils, half-legible letters, and there it is, a name. Turnbridge, 30 years ago, held by Lord Davon Thorn, until he backed the wrong brother in the Royal Succession War and got himself removed from polite society. The land passed to Baron Winthorpe, then to a loyal knight, then to you. So yes, in a twisted sense, the Thorns were here first, which makes you not a thief, but a squatter on stolen land. You close the scroll. Your hands don't shake this time, but your stomach does a slow, uncertain turn, because you're not just facing ambition now, or you're facing entitlement. That night, a fire breaks out in the Westfield. You rush out with half the manor, buckets, wet cloaks, anything that will smother flames, and you find it burning in neat, deliberate lines, shaped like a sunburst. They're not even pretending anymore. You bolster the guard, send scouts in all directions, and then, just when you think you might get an hour to breathe, a noblewoman arrives at your gates, alone. Her horse is perfect, her cloak is black, her gloves are white as bone, and her name is Lady Merrill Thorne. She doesn't demand entrance, she requests it, with such calm elegance that your guards don't know whether to stop her or serve her tea. You meet her in the hall, she curtsies and smiles like a knife wrapped in silk. "My family once ruled this land," she says. "You hold it now." You nod. "Legally?" "Perhaps," she says, "but law is only as strong as its memory." You stare at her. "Why come here?" "To offer you a choice." You raise an eyebrow. "You're here to negotiate?" "To warn," she corrects, "and perhaps to recruit." She steps forward, hands folded. You've built something real. You've earned the people's trust, their loyalty. That matters. That's rare. But it would be wasted if you died in a war not of your making. You blink. "You want me to join you? I want you to survive." And there it is, the heart of it. Not cruelty, not conquest, just reclamation. She believes Turnbridge is hers, by right, by blood. And you? You're a squatter with a sword and a good story. But stories fade, and bloodlines don't. You tell her you'll consider it. She nods and leaves. Just like that. No guards, no threats. Just the lingering scent of lavender and danger. You spend that night in the chapel. Gilbert joins you. You light a candle together. 2, actually. 1 for guidance. 1 in case the first one fails. Gilbert says nothing for a long time. Then finally, "You're not the rightful lord." You nod. "No. But you're the real one." You look at him. He sips his wine. Rightful is about birth. Real is about choice. And suddenly it's clear. You were never meant to have this place. You weren't born to it. You weren't raised for it. But that's why it matters. Because everything you've done, every choice, every risk, every scar, you chose it. You didn't inherit power, you built it, and they can't forgive that. Fun historical fact. Disinherited houses sometimes tried to reclaim lost lands through marriage, diplomacy, or, in more dramatic cases, armed return. Sometimes it worked. Other times, it just restarted the war they lost years earlier. Fringe fact. One outlawed noblewoman in 1237 marched into her former keep alone, armed only with a book of family records, and talked her way back onto the throne. She was later exiled again, then poisoned, then immortalised in 5 very contradictory songs. There's scholarly debate about whether land titles were more influenced by bloodline or favour. Some argue the crown could override any history with the right seal. Others say blood memory, family ties to the land, held powerful sway in local culture, even when legally invalid. What you face now is both. Paper versus blood, steel versus story. And it's not just about land anymore. It's about who gets to define legacy. You? Or the ghosts? The rain comes with the dawn. Not a polite drizzle or the kind of mist that makes the trees look poetic and mysterious. No, this is biblical. Horizontal. Aggressive. Like the sky is punishing the ground for something it said in confidence. You stand in the courtyard, watching it soak the stone, feeling the chill creep into your bones. The wind claws at your cloak. The storm is perfect. Because this is exactly what a siege begins with. A change in the air. And right now, everything is changing. They've stopped pretending. Last night was the fire in the fields. Today, one of your supply caravans, your last in fact, was found overturned just past Wincross Hollow. Burned, emptied, not by bandits, by men in white sun-tabards. You don't speak when the scout tells you. You just nod. Go quiet. Then walk the walls, and look for movement in the trees. They're coming, not in scattered strikes, not in quiet infiltrations. This time, it's the full pageantry of war. Lady Merrill gave you a choice. You declined without speaking. Now comes her answer. By midday, the fog starts to lift, and you see them. Lines of banners rising just above the treetops to the north. Movement along the ridge. A company of soldiers in half-plate black cloaks. They're not marching yet, but they're visible. That's the point. You gather your command in the tower chamber, no more quiet corners, no subtlety. Osric is sharpening daggers without looking. Henry's pacing. Gilbert is somehow eating a honey-glazed loaf with war in the air like it's market day. You drop a crude map on the table, point to the tree line. They've set camp here, roughly 60 men, archers, cavalry, and a supply line we can't touch without leaving the walls exposed. Any allies? Henry asks, too hopeful. No messengers are getting through, we're cut off. Gilbert says, perfect weather for a dramatic final stand, though. Very ardent of Valespire if you're into tragic ballads. Not today, you mutter, because you're not planning to die. Not now. Not when you've finally figured out what this all means. You step outside. The rain hasn't let up. The gate is slick and the mud is eager to devour your boots. You climb the wall, slowly, deliberately. Let them see you. Let her see you. And there she is. Lady Merrill Thorne. Sitting on a white horse, unbothered by the storm, her cloak barely moving. She meets your gaze across the wide stretch of wet earth like this is a garden party, and not the prelude to violence. She lifts a hand, and the horns sound. It's not a charge, it's a demonstration. A slow formation of troops along your front, shields in phalanx, archers behind them, siege ladders in the back, still lashed to carts. This isn't an immediate attack as its declaration. You feel Osric step up beside you. They could hit tonight, he says, or tomorrow, or not at all. They might just starve us out. You nod. Classic. Not very creative. That's why it'll work, you say, unless we give them a reason to stop. He looks at you sideways. Please don't say what I think you're about to say. I'm going to ride out. Damn it. It's madness, yes. You ride out with no banner, no shield, just a sword strapped across your back and a flag of truce tied to your saddle. They let you approach, because they're curious. Lady Merrill meets you halfway across the field, flanked by 4 riders who all look like they've killed people for less than a stare. You nod to them. They don't blink. You meet her eyes again. You made your point. And you ignored mine, she replies. This land belongs to House Thorne. It always has. You gesture behind you. Tell that to the people living here. She gives a tiny shrug. They'll adjust. Peasants always do. You step closer. You want the land? Fine. But not with fire. Not with blood. Challenge me. She tilts her head. To a duel? No. To a trial. Of claim. By the old code. 1 knight, 1 steward, 1 sworn testimony each. We present our case. Before witnesses, before your own lords. She laughs. You wait, and then she stops laughing. You'd gamble everything on a medieval technicality. I've gambled on worse, you say. This time I have the truth. She watches you, and for the first time you see it. Hesitation. Not fear, but uncertainty. Because if she agrees and you win, she's bound by honour to withdraw, and if she refuses, she's exposed. A noble woman unwilling to defend her bloodline in the way her house was founded, publicly. This is the one thing she didn't expect from you. A move older than her ambitions. She leans forward. You'll lose. You grin. Maybe, but I'll lose loudly, and everyone will know I stood when it mattered. She turns to her knights. They wait. Then nod. She looks back. So be it. You return to Turnbridge with mud on your cloak and a strange, stupid hope blooming in your ribs. A trial. Not a sword fight, not a siege. A contest of legacy, of law. The next day the letters go out. To nearby lords. To neutral arbiters. To the old Abbey of Greybell, where disputes like this haven't been settled in decades. You ask Gilbert if they'll even answer. He shrugs. Knights love a good trial, makes them feel righteous. You prepare like it's war. Documents, lineages, affidavits, farmer testimonies. Osric finds 2 people willing to speak. An old woman who remembers the Thorns leaving, and a mason whose great-uncle laid the first stones of your tower after their fall. Gilbert finds an ancient seal in the chapel basement, a broken token of Winthorpe's early stewardship. Probably cursed, he says. but historically accurate. And then there's you, the knight with no noble blood, no right by birth, only scars, resolve, and the belief that maybe, just maybe, the right to rule isn't born but chosen. Fun historical fact? Trials of land claim weren't common, but they did happen, especially in the 12th and 13th centuries when titles got murky and kings were too busy fighting France. Witnesses were sworn in, documents reviewed, and sometimes swords were sheathed in favour of pens. Fringe fact. One recorded trial was decided by a single goat. It was considered a land spirit, and whichever claimant it walked toward was granted the land. It went to the one with the better snacks. There's debate among historians whether such trials were genuine paths to justice or just noble theatre. Most agree they were both, but in rare cases they worked, especially when the court was impartial and the defendant wasn't already dead. You light a candle that night, not for luck, not even for guidance, but for proof. That light, small, flickering stubborn, can stand in a storm just like you. You arrive at the Abbey of Greybell 2 days before the trial. Is not what you expected. There's no towering spire, no rows of armoured clerics chanting in perfect harmony. Just a weathered stone complex perched on a wind-blasted cliffside surrounded by thorny hedges and disgruntled sheep. The Abbey's bell tower leans slightly east, like it gave up halfway through a prayer. But it's real, and more importantly it's recognised. Disputes settled here, no matter how strange the method, were bound by tradition and oath. Once a ruling was made, to violate it was to invite condemnation, not just from lords, but from the people who believed in the code. And in times like these, belief is everything. The inside of the abbey smells like wet stone and long memory. Monks shuffle by in grey robes, ignoring you with practised humility. You're led to a guest chamber by a brother named Yedric, who walks like someone who once had knees. You'll be called to the sanctuary on the day of judgment, he says. Bring your witnesses, your papers, your courage. You nod. Will there be food? No, he says flatly. Fasting purifies the soul. Henry behind you mutters, then my soul's going to be deeply impure and extremely hungry. Lady Merrill arrives the next day. Her carriage is obsidian black, drawn by horses that probably cost more than your entire stable. She exits in silence, robes trailing like smoke, flanked by 3 retainers and a man with a jaw so square it could be used for measurements. She doesn't greet you, but she does look. That slow, appraising stare that says, you still have time to back out. You don't blink, not once. The day of the trial begins before sunrise. The sanctuary is lit by pale morning light through arched windows. Rows of wooden benches fill with observers, nobles, clerics, a few curious merchants, and one man who looks suspiciously like he's selling roasted chestnuts under his robe. The Council of Judgment is small. 3 abbots, 1 knight bishop, yes, that's a real thing, and a representative of the Baron himself. Not Winthorpe, but someone close. The moment hangs thick in the air. This isn't just about land, it's about legitimacy. The knight bishop rises. Today we hear the matter of Turnbridge, a claim of ancestral right by House Thorn, contested by Sir Theon, warden and steward by royal decree. Each may present 1 claim, 1 witness, and 1 symbol. You step forward. Then Merrill. She offers a gracious nod. The game begins. Merrill goes first. She presents a lineage scroll so long it has its own retainer. Names stretch back centuries. Lords, stewards, high captains, a couple saints, and at least 2 people who may or may not have been dragons. It's impressive, admittedly, almost overwhelming. Her witness is an elderly nobleman from Norwin who swears he served under her grandfather. He weeps when describing the glory days of Thorn rule, how Turnbridge flourished, how justice flowed, how order reigned. Then she unveils her symbol, a silver ring set with a red gem, the signet of House Thorn. Worn but unmistakable. Gasps ripple through the room. Well played. Your turn. You step forward slowly. No scroll, just a folded parchment. Winthorpe's charter. Signed, sealed. The original grant naming you not just knight, But Warden, you lay it flat. Your voice doesn't rise, you don't shout, you just speak. Lords, abbots, and people of Greybell, I am not of noble birth. I have no saints in my bloodline, no ancient oaths to recite. You pause. But I was given this land, and I've kept it, through famine, through fire, through blood spilled not to conquer, but to defend. You look at each of them. Lady Thorne has a noble claim. I have a living one. Your witness? You call up Edric, the blacksmith. The room stirs. He doesn't wear armour, doesn't bow. Just walks forward like a man with mud on his boots and calluses where titles should be. I was there, he says, when the white suns came, when the fires rose, when Sir Theon stood in the courtyard and held this place with 20 men against 60. He takes a breath. My son is alive because of him. My wife has a roof because of him. We don't care what blood he has. We care what he built. Silence. Then you step forward again. Your symbol? You hold up your sword. Not polished. Not perfect. The blade is nicked. The crossguard dented. The grip frayed. This sword was never passed down to me. I earned it, piece by piece, wound by wound. I built Turnbridge with this, not for myself, but for the people who live there. You drive the blade point down into the wooden floor. I offer this as my symbol, not of nobility, but of service. You step back. The council goes quiet. Whispers fill the air like smoke. Even Lady Merrill seems momentarily shaken. She looks at your sword as if it's something indecent, and maybe it is, in this world of bloodlines and embroidered banners. But it's true, and right now truth cuts deeper than any scroll. The deliberation takes all day. You spend it pacing in the outer cloister, rain pattering against the stones. Henry reads every expression that passes from the abbey windows like a hawk watching clouds. Osric just sits, still, silent. Gilbert sleeps on a bench, possibly dead. You don't wake him to check. At sunset the bells ring. Everyone returns to the sanctuary of the night bishop stands. In matters of claim, we weigh history. In matters of stewardship, we weigh the present. And in matters of legacy, we weigh both. He looks from Merrill to you. The charter is sound, the service is proven, the people speak in his favour. He turns. To Lady Merrill Thorne we recognise her bloodline. She nods. To Sir Theon we recognise his stewardship. You don't move. And to Turnbridge, he pauses, we grant independent holding, to be neither claimed by former blood nor revoked without due cause, a free border manor, under Sir Theon's protection. Silence, then murmurs, then applause. Real, honest, you won. Not everything, but the thing that mattered. Merrill approaches you after. You've made enemies, she says. I'm good at that. She studies you, and then says softly, you've also made something else. You wait. A legend. Then she leaves. Fun historical fact. Trial settlements didn't always result in clear victory. Sometimes the court found in favour of both parties, granting recognition of noble blood while preserving current stewardship. It was a clever way to avoid war. Fringe fact? One border knight, after winning such a ruling, was nicknamed the Lord of Neither and spent the rest of his life refusing to take a formal title. His tombstone just reads, I did my job. There's debate among scholars whether these rulings really protected landholders long term. Some say it was temporary. Others argue it laid the groundwork for modern independent municipalities. Either way, today you change something. Not just for yourself, but for everybody who's ever been told they don't belong in the seat they fought to earn. You walk out of the abbey, rain in your hair, wind on your face, sword at your back, and behind you, the sound of bells, ringing not for war, but for justice. You return to Turnbridge not as a knight under scrutiny or a lord under siege, but as something altogether different. You are now officially unchallenged. The trial is done. The bells of Greybell rang for you. Even now word spreads like fire on dry parchment, through market stalls, way stations, wandering minstrels who immediately start tweaking your story for rhymes, Apparently you saved a town from doom atop a moor while fending off 10 wolves and a sorcerer. You'll allow it. But here, in the cold mist of your little border manor, surrounded by familiar stone and stubborn mud, the feeling isn't triumph, it's relief. You step through the gate, and your people meet you in silence. No fanfare, no cheers. Then the baker nods, the carpenter lifts a hand, and someone in the crowd mutters, "Welcome home, my lord." That's when it hits you. Not the title, the "my." You head inside, rain still clinging to your cloak like it's emotionally attached. The main hall hasn't changed. Still slightly draughty. Still smells faintly of hay and blood and baked apples. You hang your sword on the wall, not out of carelessness, but ritual. A signal. The battle for now is over. Gilbert is already in the kitchen, which you expected. He's ordered a feast. Just enough for victory, not enough to provoke the gods, he says, which honestly sounds like a sound theological doctrine. Osric stands by the hearth, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You did it, he says. You nod. No one's coming for your title anymore. You nod again. He stares into the fire. That doesn't mean they won't come for you. Of course not. But at least now, when they do, they'll have to walk through everything you've built. And it's not just walls and towers anymore, it's loyalty. It's a name and it's a people. You find Henry outside in the courtyard, sword in hand, practicing swings in the mud. He's better now, still reckless, still talks too much. But his stance has weight. His strikes have purpose. He sees you and grins. So what do we do now? You shrug. We rebuild the west field, reinforce the north gate, find whoever keeps stealing the chapel wine. He raises an eyebrow. I meant after all this, after winning. You look around. The fog's lifting. Your manor stands whole, and the land, the same land you once woke up to like a guest, now belongs to you in ways paper could never explain. What we always do, you say. We keep going. The days pass. They come with ordinary problems. A cow goes missing, an outhouse collapses, someone claims their neighbour turned into a toad. They hadn't. It was just a very ugly man. You hold court once a week, hear disputes, manage resources, draft letters to the Baron when needed. Always polite, always firm. The strange thing, you start to feel peaceful, not soft, not bored, just steady. And that's when you realise this is what knighthood was supposed to be. Not just battles and banners, but continuity, presence, stewardship. You never thought of yourself as a foundation. Now you are one. Then, one evening, the goat dies. Old age. Peaceful. In its sleep. The same goat that watched you bleed in the stables and climbed your walls like it owned the place. Henry buries it with ceremony. Gilbert composes a hymn. Osric refuses to attend on religious grounds. You attend alone that night. You light a candle and place it by the grave, which is somehow better marked than your armoury. A humble stone reads, "She butted kings." You whisper, "Rest easy, you stubborn little beast." Then you walk back to your manor under a sky full of stars. No war in the distance, no horns on the wind, just the hush of a world between moments. But you know it won't last forever. Peace, like seasons, is a visitor. Already the roads to the west whisper of border tension. Some small village was attacked. A dispute over river rights is growing in the southern territories. The thorns have gone quiet, but quiet is rarely surrender. Still, you don't raise your sword at rumours. You listen. You learn. And when the next threat comes, because it will, you won't be caught wondering who you are. You're the Knight of Turnbridge, the Warden, the once unwanted, the once unworthy. And now you're the reason this place still breathes. You stand at your tower window one last time. The fields are dark but not silent. There's life out there. Candles in homes, laughter in kitchens, footsteps in the soil. People live because you stayed, because you didn't run, because you fought for something more than titles and banners. And maybe, just maybe, one day, some future knight will wake up in your armour, look out your window and wonder how you built it. And you? You woke up in armour, you made mistakes, you broke rules, you learned to carry a sword, and you built a legacy from nothing. No prophecy, no chosen blood, just choice, Just grit. Just you. And so, as the stars drift overhead and the fires of Turnbridge burn low, you sit at the edge of your bed. Not a lord's bed, not a king's, just yours. The armour is off. The sword rests nearby. The weight of it all has lifted, but not vanished. Never that. Because this world, like all others, keeps turning. You know there will be more letters with sealed threats, more noble names with dusty claims, more winters that test your stores and springs that test your patience. But you faced war. You faced doubt. You faced ghosts, both of blood and of blade. And you're still here, still standing, still you. Outside, the wind brushes against the shutters like an old friend passing through. A dog barks in the village below. Someone sings, terribly, off-key. You'd bet it's Gilbert. Probably has wine. The people of Turnbridge sleep under your watch, not because you promised protection, but because you delivered it. You close your eyes. Let your mind drift back to the day you woke up in this strange, muddy, dangerous, glorious life. You didn't ask for it, but you answered it, and somehow, impossibly, you made it yours. So if you wake again tomorrow in a new place, in a new time, in a new body, remember this. You were once a knight in medieval England, and you didn't just survive, you became legend. Now breathe easy, let the torches fade, let the dawn wait. You've earned your rest.